just do that on the mic for a minute? I want to check to make sure that the space.
Now we just shrink them down. Well, I can do the testing that I need to do.
Since 5 o'clock.
I was told to do this. I'm not trying to drive you all crazy.
They had a good turnout.
Yes, I saw the.
Testing, August 7th, 2018, joint meeting.
How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Okay, so they
Show you one
switched
thing.
chairs again, huh?
You gonna show me an IT at work? No, this is me changing my hats into audio visual guy.
So you're not IT, you're AV.
Oh, God.
Janet, do you want me to move the screen towards you? Oh, because you can see that one. Never mind.
It was hot.
I was going to ask you if you wanted me to turn that screen towards you more, but it doesn't matter because you can see the big one. So
Sorry.
it's up to you. It's up to you. I can move it if you want.
It just, oh, no, it was just, I thought you were talking to me. I apologize. It's hot over there.
Right here.
They tried to cool it off, but they couldn't. It was hot.
Phone's on vibrate.
Scott, you're over here.
Oh, that's right.
Art. This meeting is gonna go like.
Don't do that.
I know she's trying to put a pox on it.
Good.
Yep.
Are we being recorded now? Is it on?
Where do you guys want that? So that you can see. Okay.
That's what I thought.
I just wanted you guys to see it when you first walked in.
It's recording. Where? They started early. I'm ready for my shot. Mr. DeMille.
It's hot.
They got a open house at the Boys and Girls Club on the 23rd. I think I'm going to go to that. 6th and 12th grade, little kids. I think I'm going to go to that.
Nice.
Scott, what time is it? Okay, thank you. 2-minute warning. That's live.
Yeah,
You
they've
know,
got a
the
brand
Boys and
new-
Girls Club moved to Las Plumas. They're no longer at the community center.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
When?
Well, their fiscal year was up July 2018.
I figured.
Well, because they couldn't get the grade.
Oh,
Used to getting it
yeah.
12 cents.
Right, good.
Yeah.
August 23rd. I'm going to go to that.
Yeah. Do you?
Scott, what time is it? Sorry, what's it? You are a timekeeper. You're the gatekeeper. Okay. Oh, gosh. Oh. Well. Oh, my goodness. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Oroville City Council meeting, August 7, 2018. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hatley. Here. Councilmember Thompson. Here. Councilmember Berry. Here. Vice Mayor Goodson.
Here.
Councilmember Del Rosario.
Yes.
Councilmember Draper.
Here.
Mayor Dahmeyer.
The council will now convene to close session. But prior to that, can I just bear with me for 1 minute? I know that everybody's looked at the agenda, and if we can all approve the agenda. By a motion.
So if somebody can make a motion to approve the agenda, that way the procedures that are in this agenda are official. And it specifically relates to how many people might speak and time limits. So we would appreciate it if council would approve the agenda, which frankly most other councils and commissions do.
I move
Right.
that we approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Agenda in the car.
Well, I kind of panicked because I
Is
didn't.
there an extra one down there?
What a stupid thing to do.
And yours is probably all marked, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you, dear?
Hi, Carolyn. Scott, congrats.
Thank you.
Oh.
Hey, did you want to? Yes. Hey, Scott, real quick. I don't know which one of the minutes, but I'm not shown as being present at those 3 meetings, and I was, they were.
keep them in Bill's area. Oh, they're not, no, actually, that'd be,
Yes, yes.
I was the chair of the board when I left. The program fell apart when I left. Coffee and City Hall.
You were,
So I'm thinking of starting that.
that was an excellent program. That's a great idea. Was that a volunteer or was that a paid?
And so what I would do is probably volunteer first, just to get it going, and if we got somebody going, then be the kind of paid coordinator for it, yeah. Not that company, yeah.
well, it's still, they got half hour.
I was talking to Constantine today, he's the assistant city manager of Chico. It just sort of came up organically, because we were talking about things where people were looking at sidelines.
Yeah.
Wanting to make people.
I learned a lot just because Dina,
Right.
that's how Dina and Kari met, and Kari told Dina about the job of being much about our county from just her telling me about the program.
Twice now in a short period of time.
My job isn't exactly what they're gonna hire for, but, you know, they're hiring a staff writer.
For the newspaper.
Yeah, so
But you don't wanna do that?
I'm never gonna be able to be the editor again because I have too many things. Can't be a city
I
business.
hated that, but
As it stands, there's already a city editor. I can't cover any city business. And there are things that just don't, right, I can't really cover. So communication is already there, I'm conflicted out of things.
Throwing it everywhere, huh? How are you?
Yeah, that's a good over.
Family's good?
Yeah.
all set up over there?
This is my concern. This is really well. This is the area approximate.
Yeah.
That would be affected by this. And I'm concerned that none of this areas were noticed. I know you did under the
Yeah.
mass thing, but
Well, the reason why they don't need, the reason why they don't need individually notice is we're not
So you got a
changing the zoning,
non-agenda
we're
and
adding a use to the current zoning.
you're changing theirs.
They already approved the
By
agenda.
saying that
Oh, but that's what you wanna
these
talk
people can
about.
no longer
Yeah.
apply
Okay.
for a use permit for daycare.
I noticed there weren't minutes, approval of the
don't
minutes
get me
from the
wrong.
last meeting.
Look, I
That will
understand what you're
come
saying.
later
I get
in
it.
this meeting.
And what I would say is raise
The
that
approval
during
of the minutes.
Should I
After
do
the
that as
public
commissioner
hearings.
or?
Yeah, I would do
On
this,
the
I would do
consent
it as, well, you decide, you can do it either one. I'll do it as a commissioner, great.
What's that?
It's right there, item 6.
Just,
Okay,
I'd like to get this
We just
passed
put
out.
the public hearings first.
all right, thank you.
So that they can see what I'm talking about.
I don't know, I was looking for it, there was so much stuff, I never found it. There's like 350 something pages. Item number 6, thank you.
6.
Okay. If I raise, because I have three issues.
Yeah.
That are recommended.
Yeah.
And then I would do this one first.
Like that.
And where in the process of the hearing should I do that? Where is the agenda process? Should I do that?
Did you guys receive our PowerPoint presentation? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So what'll happen is when you're ready,
Yeah, I would,
when you're ready to go, you'll grab that, we'll pull it up and then you can.
Perfect. All right, thank
I
you.
would do it in here when you all are discussing under number 1.
So this is after public.
How are you doing?
Good, how about you? It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Surviving all the smoke.
Yeah, just sneezing like.
Same here. Same here. Yep. That's probably true. I mean,
I don't,
yeah, that's probably true.
maybe people here. Council.
Yeah.
Oh, they already thought about that. I didn't have
So,
Need a candle. Thank you.
extra chair in there or extra
Chair?
a chair? I'm trying to move over
Do you need
by
one?
the mic. Okay.
No, they're gonna be over here.
Jeez. So,
I know.
Standing there lonely.
I know. Well, Marlene, who is, Carl Durling is the planning commission.
Who is who?
Carl Durling is on the planning commission over there. Okay.
But you think we got it a
I didn't
previous
even have
meeting?
time to go home and comb my hair or anything.
Oh, yeah.
Change my clothes.
I think there's 7 or 8 of them
know.
now.
Yes.
No, I just couldn't make it. One more thing today.
No.
Too much.
This is for the hearing.
That's why. Just say. Oh, no action was taken, direction was given.
Sure. We have the timer set for a minute and a half. Great. About 8 for non-agenda. And as of now, we only have a couple for the hearing, but I'm sure that'll explode based on the size of the audience. Back there. Presumably. There's 6:30. So I gotta have 4.
Supposed to be here somewhere, but I don't know if Kirk, I don't know if he could get a seat.
Everyone's here? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the council meeting August 7th, 2018. We have just come back from closed session. No action was taken, but direction was given. Councilman Thompson, could you please lead us in the pledge?
Sure, let's stand. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Scott.
Madam Vice Mayor, if I could.
Yes.
I'd like to make a couple, rearrange the agenda a little bit tonight.
Yes.
I'd like to move proclamations and presentations to the backside of the meeting, along with public communication on non-agenda items.
All right, so we're moving the presentations, proclamations, inclusive of the non-agenda items to the end, all right?
Correct. And then from there, at this time, I'd like to, with this half hour we have between now and the scheduled public hearing time, I'd like to begin with the consent calendar.
All right. Consent calendar is our items 6 through 17.
Madam Vice Mayor,
Yes.
on
Did
some of
you-
these I have to excuse myself because of,
Which one would that be?
I believe it's number,
Are you making reference to 19?
to the assessment districts. There's 5.
Well, there's 4 and 5, and then we're looking at 19. I believe that you would recuse yourself for number 19.
Right.
Just for the ease of council too, I'll advise you on which ones individually you should recuse yourself from as those come up. The consent calendar tonight consists of 6 through
6 through 17. So I'm looking for, if there are no items to be pulled. Yes.
Mr. Hatley, you do not need to recuse yourself. The assessments are outside of the consent calendar. They're not part of the consent calendar.
Right.
So you're okay on the consent calendar.
Right.
Unless there's some other individual item that you may have a conflict on, but it doesn't, I don't think so.
Well, is this on? My problem is, when I'm looking at item 5, Cala Vista. I mean,
item number 5 is not on the consent calendar.
It's in a little different order tonight, Councilman Hatley. We've moved public hearings to the front of the agenda, followed by consent.
Okay.
It's a complicated agenda this time, so I'm just asking for everyone to bear with us. So we're addressing consent calendar items 6 through 17, and if there are no comments, if there's no one that wants to pull in an item, then I'm looking for a motion and a second.
Well, I move that we accept the consent calendar.
Voting's open.
Is it up there? There it is.
Motion carries.
And so
That was just items 6 through 17 on the consent calendar.
what I'm going to do is, since we have time, our joint session with the Planning Commission does not start until 6:30. I'm going to ask that item 20 be pulled. I do see that there are representatives in the audience. Item 20 is going to be Haven of Hope.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. If I could ask Keisha to join me up here for a moment. Keisha Hills represents the South Oroville Improvement Association, which has presented the idea previously of the Haven of Hope on Wheels, which is a community-wide program that will assist the homeless through outreach and redirection toward services that will help break the cycle and take them in a positive direction in their life. Keisha is, if she could tonight, just give us a little brief overview of the sustainability of the project, because one of the big questions we previously have had is how do we sustain such a project? So with that, I'll turn it over to Keisha for a moment.
And so after, what I hear you saying is after the presentation, we're just going to give direction.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. As far as how we plan on sustaining the project Haven of Hope on Wheels, pardon, I'm so sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Marlene.
Thank you. Sorry about that. As far as sustaining our program with Haven of Hope on Wheels, we have various income sources that we're looking at. Right now we are doing a fundraiser through the GoFundMe, and so that is just one of a few of our fundraising efforts. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous here.
Take your time.
So we also plan on having a resource center that will work collaboratively with our program in order to provide the services, as you've probably have already or just remember when I did the presentation a while back. It's not just about being able to provide the showers and laundry services to the homeless population, but being able to coagulate an effort through our resource center to continue those services that the homeless population needs so much. And so within that, we have various resources that will allow us to sustain our program, again, through that resource center. Not sure if I need to go over the costs, but to effectively run our resource center, we're looking at an annual cost of $287,364. So to move forward with that, to successfully run the Haven of Hope on Wheels as well as the resource center, we're looking at an annual operational budget of $435,924. And again, this is going to run operationally with collaborative efforts with other nonprofits. We're not doing this alone, and so we have a great program in store for that.
Thank you, Keisha.
Thank you, Keisha. And if I could just add to that, some of the other additional uses that could be used for this hygiene trailer and funding sources for this would be, a good example would be the car fire recently that occurred.
Absolutely.
It could be something that could be deployed to that area, and if you've lost everything, sometimes a shower just could mean everything, or being able to do your laundry, something like that. So it is something. It could be operated through the CAL FIRE network, where it could be sent there, and this thing could actually generate money to help sustain it. So we are not suggesting that the city operate and sustain this piece of equipment. We are suggesting that we assist the Southside Improvement Association with acquiring what is necessary to begin their program and become partners with them. What we're looking for tonight is simply direction from the council. Do you, the feeling that we've got back, or the feedback we've received so far, is you believe this is a good project and you would like to see ways that we could potentially fund this? So if that's what you're looking, what you would like, then we would like to get that direction, and we'd also like you to set a date to review some possible funding sources for that project.
So it's my understanding that this project would also there would be a partnership with the Hope Center. Am I correct?
Yep.
And of course it takes a collaborative effort, behavioral health services. We also have Oroville Rescue Mission, and there's so many entities. Now is the time. The city has continued to look to the council for direction. We know that our homelessness, whatever component that is, it's on the rise, it's on the increase. We cannot continue to kick this can down the road. We must do something, and we must find resources to help this population. I believe that we have we're going to explore funding for this. And I believe that we do have a funding source. I'm not sure what those figures look like, but it would be through the rural development.
We would look at all possible funding sources, and there is those out there. I think this is a quality of life issue for everyone in our community. It's not just about the homeless. It's about doing something about it, something proactively. If we can put the homeless population or the transient population in the city of Oroville to work, that benefits everybody in the city of Oroville. If the funding that we have can only be used for certain things and is earmarked for that by the federal government or the state government, then we should apply that in the appropriate manner. So we're looking for direction to have a meeting to bring that back to you and
give to you your options of what those are and what those funding levels could be. And yes, it would be a collaborative effort on the city's behalf to not only work with the Southside Improvement Association, but also to work with the Hope Center, the Rescue Mission, whatever providers are out there that can help us through non-traditional ways deal with a problem that continues to grow within our city and is affecting all of our citizens' quality of life.
Thank you. What is the pleasure of the council?
I have my request. Can you see?
Councilwoman Draper and then Councilman Thompson.
Well, I've been really excited about this project since I first heard about it, and I'd like to commend Pastor Kevin Thompson and you and the others that have been involved for all your hard work. And this is what community spirit is all about, and I'm really excited about it. And I know many of us have donated individually, but we are hopeful that we can find some kind of grants and funding to assist you guys in this really worthy effort. And thank you both for your work.
Councilman Thompson.
Good afternoon. Very brave for stepping up here. And I also agree with what the other council members and Vice Mayor Goodson have shared about how great of a project this is for you guys to see those who are down and out and do what you can to help them out. And as also a pastor here in Oroville, obviously I'm for charity. May sound strange, though. I'm actually not for taxed charity. I believe that when citizens give money, especially in our current condition, that we are having to let go of our public employees to clean our streets, to pave our roads. Police officers were underfunded, so all these things. So when taxpayers are giving money, I think the priority would be specifically for the current needs that we have. I think part of it also comes down to fundamentally as a nation, we're at a place where American citizens are kind of wondering what is the purpose of government. And I believe that's a discussion for another day. But with our declaration, is to provide for three main things, right? Life, to protection of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And with that, as a taxpayer, I believe in charity, and I obviously give to charity. And I'm also a recipient of people's charity, but I'm not into forced charity. I think it's one thing if I choose to give somebody a helping hand, but it's another thing if I take somebody's money through taxation and then provide something like a shower to somebody else. I don't think that's a place that government should step into. So I think that's where maybe people can step into that separation there. So that may sound weird come from me, but that's my standpoint. Thank you.
And I just want to clarify, no one up here is suggesting that we will use tax money for this. Grant money and other sources, especially through Continuum of Care, there are some things out there that we can look at to do it, I think.
Right, I just want to piggyback off of what you just said. This would certainly not be a gift of public funds.
No.
And so saying that, I'm just looking for direction from the majority of council. Do we want to explore avenues of funding for this project to help with the Haven of Hope in conjunction with the Hope Center and other entities that serve the underserved population?
And just a note to Councilwoman Linda Draper, we are in partnership with the COC and we're working with them very closely. So just wanted to make mention of that.
I realize that, yeah. Well, I'm definitely in favor of that, so.
All right.
Anybody else?
I am in favor. Councilwoman Del Rosario is in favor. Councilman Berry is in favor. Mr. Hatley and Mr. Thompson.
No.
All right.
He said no.
Majority.
Okay.
Is consensual.
So with that, we will set a future time to discuss it in more detail and look at other priorities as well.
Yes, thank you so very much. And we still.
Thank you, Keisha.
I believe we can.
To quantify my decision for no, and that is directing staff to work on that is an expenditure of city time. So
I believe that we have time to address item number 19.
Yes, ma'am. If the council would, I'd ask Councilman Thompson and Councilman Hatley to recuse themselves from this item. It directly impacts personal property. Ruth, would you like to give this presentation? It's on your CFDs.
Item 19 addresses the annual special tax for the city's community facilities in District Number 2006-1.
This is actually something that you do annually. I don't know if Ruth wants to address it or not.
That's exactly what I was going to say. This is just an annual assessment that we do every year, and basically there's no change from last year.
Ruth, could you please speak into the mic?
It's not.
It's not. Ah, thank you.
Basically, this is an annual exercise that we do to place assessments on the tax roll, and there's no change from last year.
And we're recommending approval.
Councilman Berry is in the queue. Thank you, Jackie. Yes.
For 10 years, I've had a problem with this. We still haven't developed a plan for doing anything on the west side, for the west side facilities, but we're still collecting these taxes. And I still want to know when we're going to do something with it. The taxes on this area over there are quite costly. A couple $1,000s, I believe, on the different parcels out there on the people. And we still don't have a plan for doing anything for the west side facilities. And I think there's options or whatever available to get something started over there, at least on this. And I brought this up numerous times. Well, every year before the council, and previous councils have been, you know, not willing to do anything about it. And I think it's high time to do something about it or stop collecting these taxes.
To answer
Thank
your
you,
question,
Councilman Berry.
Councilman, if I could just give you a little bit of background on the west side safety taxes that are in place, or the Melrose that's out there. This is something that's entered into by each individual property owner that's disclosed when they purchase the property. We have been collecting the money. We have been providing the public service into the area. The problem that we ran into with this is when they were originally put in place, they were anticipating full build out of these subdivisions. None of these subdivisions have reached even 25% of build out. So the money that's being collected is not an adequate amount of money to achieve the goals that were laid out in the original Melrose. We have taken the step over the last year to have a fire safety facility in the airport district drawn. The mechanical engineering that's necessary for it has been done. Where we're at right now, which is kind of holding us up, is just lack of employees. We do have the money. We can build this building. Problem is there's nobody to put in it. And so right now I'm not sure it's prudent to build an empty building and have it sit out there unattended. So we are working through that. And I agree. We should either do what we said we're going to do or stop taking the money. I mean, but we are working toward that end. We do have a plan, and it's a matter of if build out had been reached, we would have achieved our goal. Unfortunately, it was not.
Okay, thank you.
Are you satisfied with that? I was just going to say that the chief and I had a conversation about this. So,
sure.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. I'm wondering. I think we have approximately. Let's go ahead and. I'm looking if there's no other comments. I'm looking for a motion in a second.
I'll make the motion that we adopt resolution number 8736, 8737, and 8738, and authorize the mayor to sign the Proposition 218 certificates for inclusion on the 2018-2019 Butte County tax roll.
Second.
Could you speak up, Marlene, please?
Second.
Thank you. Voting? Can someone please get Councilman
Passes
Thompson and
3-1.
Hatley?
Passes.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay. That was 3 ayes and 1 no.
Yep.
Motion
Yes.
carries.
Yes, please.
Chief, can we take care of item 18?
Yep.
Let's move forward with item 18. We have approximately 7-8 minutes into the joint session. Councilman, we are moving on to item 18, a memorandum of understanding with the Oroville Union High School District, the Oroville City Elementary School District, and Thermalito Union Elementary School District. Are there any comments from the dais?
Yes.
Councilwoman Del Rosario.
I think this is a wonderful program. This introduces children to the police at a young age, and it builds rapport between the students and the police department. Aside from the fact that it keeps them safe, it also builds a relationship that carries through into adulthood, and I think it's a wonderful program, and I highly favor it.
Can I just give an overview of it real quickly so everybody is in the audience is familiar with what we're talking about?
Oh, the community service officer?
The school resource officers.
Community resource officer.
I will go through this just real quickly. What this item is just the reintroduction of school resource officers to not only our high school, the Oroville High School, the Prospect High School, but also our elementary schools. It puts an officer, will be on the Oroville Elementary School District campuses and the Thermalito School District campuses and our Oroville High School District campus every day at Oroville High School, at least once per week, multiple times per week at the elementary schools. Each school in the elementary classification has contributed $50,000 toward this project on an annual basis. The high school has contributed $87,000. This will cover the cost of 2 entry-level police officers and a sergeant to run this program. This is an investment in our community. I think it's a worthwhile project. We have nothing more valuable, in my opinion, than our children.
Absolutely.
And this puts somebody on those campuses. It not only helps secure the campuses in the event of a tragic situation, but it also builds that rapport. It, lets children know that police officers are people too. There's actual people inside of those uniforms. So and I think it also works for our police officers as well. I mean, because knowing the children, knowing your community is a very important thing. So that's what this project is about. It is with the the 2 elementary school districts and the high school, which they have been very good to work with. Lieutenant Nicodemus has worked very hard on this to put this together, and I very much appreciate it. So we're looking for approval of the council to enter into these memorandums of understanding and the authorization to hire 2 entry-level police officers and make a promotion within the police department to sergeant.
Well, thank you, Chief. As you know, I work with at-risk children, and you're singing to the choir when it comes to the, I call them the community resource officers, but they've been very instrumental in helping Youth for Change and our kids become very successful. All right, are there any other comments? Councilmember Thompson is in the queue.
Can you just give me a brief history? I believe there was resource officers there before, were there not?
We have had a resource officer previously in the high school district, and what happened to that position was at the time the high school district was funding it at $65,000 a year. $65,000 a year did not cover the cost of the officer to be on campus, and it took the officer out of patrol. Our staffing has reached a level that it was necessary to pull that officer out, and we could no longer afford to subsidize the officer. So we did pull out of that contract for 1 or 2 years, and we have now entered back into it with a higher level of reimbursement from the high school.
Actually, it was 1 year. All right, are there any other comments? If not, I'm looking for a motion and a second.
Move we adopt resolutions 8728 and agreement 3252, resolution 8729 and agreement 3253, and resolution 8730 with agreement number 3254.
Second.
Voting's open.
Unanimously, motion passes.
Just have to talk more directly into the mic.
We have approximately. Are you done? Is it 6 minutes?
3 minutes.
Well, we can recess until 6:30. Is that ideal? And then at 6:30, we'll have a combined meeting of the Oroville City Council and the Oroville Planning Commission. What I am going to suggest is for those who would like to comment on items 1, 2, and 3 to please submit speaker cards. There will be a presentation, and once the presentation is over, there will be no more speaker cards that will be accepted.
Madam Vice Mayor, in the 2 minutes or so that we have, could I make just a couple of statements?
Absolutely.
And I'm going to address predominantly the members of the public as we talk about these issues tonight. It seems that more and more, and I'll speak with a broad brush here, not pointing the finger at anybody. It seems that there has been more and more, especially on a national level, and it's flowing down to the local level. There have been more and more personal attacks jumping into subjective matters. Please limit your comments to the subject at hand and not attack the individuals who are making the decisions or other speakers who are making comments. Everybody has opinions. These are all firmly held beliefs that many individuals have. Even though they may differ from you, please don't attack someone else that has an opinion that's different than yours. And in particular, please don't attack the decision makers up here who are listening to all the opinions. I would really appreciate that. And
thank you, Scott, and I appreciate you saying that. I'm calling to order the joint meeting of the Oroville City Council and the Oroville Planning Commission. I'm asking for roll for the Planning Commission. Jackie?
Commissioner Brand, Commissioner Britton, Commissioner Chapman,
Here.
Commissioner Jenkins, Commissioner McDavitt,
Here.
Vice Chairperson Commissioner Darling,
Here.
And then Chairperson Commissioner Robinson.
Here.
Sorry.
Jackie, I just want to ask you, approximately how many speaker cards do we have on agenda items 1, 2, and 3?
6.
About 6.
All right.
I'm sure that there will be more at the conclusion.
Thank you, Mr. Landau. Bear with me. I'm going to go over with you the public hearing procedure, and it is as follows. The mayor or chairperson opens the public hearing. Staff presents and answers questions from council or commissioners. Hearing is opened for public comment limited to 3 minutes. In the event of more than 10 speakers, time will be limited to 1.5 minutes. Speakers are requested to provide a speaker card to the city clerk. Public comment session is closed. And what follows is the council or the commissioners debate and action is taken.
Vice Mayor, just for your information, at this point, we do have more than 10 speakers.
Thank you very much. And as stated, the comments will now be limited to 1.5 minutes per speaker. Thank you. And I would ask that you please be respectful of that time. Do we have a presentation from SCI?
We do.
I didn't see you. Good evening, Neil.
Good evening, Vice Mayor, members of the council, commissioners, and members of the general public. I'm Neil Hall with SCI Consulting Group, and with me is my associate, Kyle Tankard, who has actually done a lot of the heavy lifting on this project. We'd like to go through where we're at tonight. The city of Oroville has moved in a very timely fashion, and we're very pleased with how your process is going. We do work with a number of cities on cannabis implementation, and you are keeping this going. So I just push, I'm going to give this a shot.
Hold on.
Say when? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, you may have to.
Did you click it on?
Is it on?
The little
The top part?
slide.
There's a button on the side.
On the side. I see it. Yeah, it's on. At least it shows the red.
Oh, we can advance it.
All right, just
Go ahead to the next slide. So this is kind of the history of what we've done so far. Of course, you know in 2016 that Proposition 64 passed, and the state furthered those regulations with SB 94, now called MACURSA. In 2018, the council directed staff to develop commercial cannabis implementation measures along with the tax measure, and staff contacted us. We started working on this project and looking at Oroville in terms of implementation in February. In May, the city hosted 2 community meetings. In June, we hosted a stakeholder meeting, and in July, at our last presentation, the council approved a cannabis business tax for the November election.
I'm going to interrupt you one more time and just indicate again that speaker cards will be accepted until the end of this presentation. So if you want to speak, submit a card now. I'm sorry. Next slide.
Thank you, Tom.
Go ahead to the next slide. There we go. So tonight we've done the community research and the outreach. Tonight we'll be talking about the land use regulations, the health and safety ordinance. I believe that your health and safety ordinance is Title V and your land use is Title 17. We've split deliberately the regulations for the implementation of cannabis into a land use portion and a regulatory portion. The two don't necessarily go together, and as you'll see further in the presentation, all of the activities require a CUP. So there will be a public hearing anytime any of these activities is proposed, and it will need to go to the Planning Commission first, and then a recommendation to the council will follow that.
CUP being conditional use permit?
Thank you. Sorry, it is a conditional use permit, and that requires public noticing and also so notification of those businesses close by and a public hearing as well. Go ahead to the next slide. So what we're doing, let's see. So the land use ordinance, the first part of the ordinance that we'll address, requires a 600-foot buffer from schools. This is the state regulation distance, although you can pick a different distance, shorter or greater, depending on what the city wants to do, but they recommend 600 feet at the state level. There's a 1,000-foot separation between retail businesses, so not necessarily between manufacturing or distribution or testing businesses, but between any type of a storefront business. There is they say a minimum, I believe that's supposed to be a maximum of 3 cannabis retail businesses here in the city of Oroville to start with. On-site consumption is prohibited here in Oroville, and I will just tell you I am working with a client that is allowing on-site consumption, and it's a lot of work. So I think you're making the right decision starting with that. Outdoor cultivation is prohibited. This is where you run into a lot of the odor problems, but a solid facility that allows mixed light or indoor growing is allowed. with odor absorbing ventilation. And I will also say that I've been to a lot of facilities. The odors in the indoor and the mixed light facilities and all of them are negligible. You can't smell anything. You can walk up to a facility that's full of it and there is no odor anymore. They've really done a good job with that. We're talking about the commercial districts, which are those designated C, and then the industrial districts, which are M for manufacturing. The retail is allowed in both the commercial and the manufacturing or industrial district, but I believe not in the downtown area. The downtown area, I believe, is not in one of those districts at this point. Manufacturing, cultivation, distribution, testing, and the micro businesses are allowed in the industrial sections, or industrial zones, I should say. Go ahead to the next slide. I'm going to go back to that slide for one more moment. If you see up in the right-hand corner, that's where the conditional use permit is required for all activities. I just want to make sure everybody is clear on that. So the Title V, the business license and regulations, the purpose and intent is to regulate for the safety and the welfare of the residents of Oroville, how those businesses operate, just like any other business would. It establishes a separate permit that's required. In addition to any land use permit, they must get a cannabis business permit. So they have to adhere not only to the land use permit that the Planning Commission will hear about as well, but they also have to adhere to all of the regulatory and safety facets in the ordinance that would be required to get the cannabis business permit. They must also obtain that land use permit. However, they can hold a cannabis business permit. If they don't get a land use permit for it, it doesn't do them any good. They have to have both those permits to operate. So whether or not they're in that zone without a cannabis business permit, or whether they have a cannabis business permit with no place to operate, in either of those situations, they will not be allowed to have a business. They must have both to operate. You're allowing both medicinal and adult use. We are seeing that the adult use is becoming almost entirely what's happening here in the state. The amount of medicinal sales is dropping dramatically because a lot of people don't want to be on a database that is required in order to get that medical card. And in our discussions with the dispensary owners, most of them say that over 90% of their sales now are adult use, even from people that prior to this were using a medical card. We're talking about manufacturing that is volatile and non-volatile. And again, just for the information of anybody that wasn't at our one of our other meetings, a volatile process is a closed loop system. It's used for processing essential oils from a lot of different products in a lot of different industries, including soybeans, lavender, rosemary, those types of essences. They're all produced in what's called a volatile method. Cultivation, nurseries, distribution, micro businesses, and testing would all be allowed with the appropriate permits and in the appropriate zones. So in our operational standards, the regulatory portion, this is a small part of it. I didn't count the pages, but typically there are over 15 pages of operational standards. But you have your security requirements, you have the product track and trace. One of the big problems in the cannabis industry has been the diversion of cannabis. The state government, as well as the federal government and other states, want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So track and trace is required at the state level and at the local level. So they must have a system that interfaces with the state so that every single destroyed piece of cannabis, sold piece of cannabis, or processed piece of cannabis is tracked and identified. And this is really helpful if you have a recall. You got to figure out where it's going. We don't want the Chipotles out there. Interior and exterior lighting is required. Odor control systems. In the state regulations, there's nothing about odor control. We believe it should be at the local level. Trash, litter, and graffiti are addressed. The abandonment of the business. What we don't want is for somebody to go out and get one of what may be only 3 licenses and then not start the business. Testing, labeling, and storage are all required and mandated. They're also mandated at the state level. Disposal of cannabis and related materials. You know, how are you going to dispose of waste products? We don't want those finding their way into the public. They should be destroyed, and they will be under this regulation. Water usage is controlled both at the state level and at the local level, as is employee safety. And again, this is not the complete resolution. So additional requirements in retail, they're going to require a security guard. In order to purchase at a retail outlet, you either have to be 21 and older or 18 with a doctor's recommendation. Delivery is allowed from a city permitted retailer, although only during business hours. And again, that is a state regulation as well. And I will just remind everybody that when I first started talking about what the state's attitude about this is, the state here in California missed their revenue goal. In Nevada, they're 25% over their highest expectation right now. And the reason is because the number of cities that have participated in this and have not enacted bans is very small. So there's not a lot of participation from cities, and the state government is missing revenue. Initially, the state government has been playing nice, and they said, you know, if you don't want to have deliveries in your city, you don't have to. That changed with this last round of emergency or of permanent regulations proposed by the Bureau of Cannabis Control. Now, anybody who has a dispensary license in any city can deliver to any other city. So if you don't do that, somebody will be able to come in here from Shasta Lake or from any other city that has retail outlets allowed and do deliveries and collect the tax money from that. We would suggest it would be prudent for the city to collect that themselves. For manufacturers, non-volatile and volatile extraction, no retail sales are allowed. There are inspections by fire chief and any city officials. For cultivation, outdoor cultivation is prohibited. Cultivation has to be in an enclosed and secure structure, and we talk about mixed light and indoor cultivation. Mixed light simply means sometimes natural light is used, and it is actually not only an energy saving, but also an ecological step that's taken in a lot of cultivation facilities. Distribution is subject to police and city inspections as well, and requires a bond for product destruction. And micro businesses must conduct at least 3 activities on the same premises, and 3 out of the 4 activities that are allowed. There are 5 activities allowed. They cannot participate in the testing, which is a standalone entity. So they must do either cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and or retail in order to get a micro business license. There are 2, the permit selection process. This is, I'm reviewing close to 200 applications right now in one city. This is an extremely important process, especially when you limit the number of retail outlets, which you are doing with dispensaries. You are going to get a lot of applications. Right now, Chico does not allow. The city of Redding has started to move forward. But other than that, Marysville and Yuba City don't have any retail going on, even though I believe Marysville had approved it at one time. There is an application fee with the phase 1. It requires a live scan be conducted on the business owners. And then in phase 2, they pay a second application fee, and they get a comprehensive background check along with a review of the business and operational plans. And then the permit is issued upon issuance of a land use permit. So the competitive selection process will be for those limited. So you're not limiting at this point, and again, the council will decide this, but right now, you're not limiting any of the activities but retail. Retail then will have a 30-day application period so that you can start assessing the applications you get at the same time. That will close and would reopen again when you fall below your targeted amount. So if 3 is your targeted amount, if it goes down to 2, you'll begin accepting applications again for that particular activity. The limited activities are based on a merit-based scoring system. There are a lot of merit-based scoring systems currently in the state. They can reward a variety of different things like community participation, security measures, operational standards, those types of things. And we've suggested that you all use a selection panel to conduct that ranking and scoring. It can be city staff. It can be, we wouldn't recommend necessarily elected officials. We think there's probably too much politics in it for that, but we do think city staff and perhaps people from the industry. And then the scoring criteria would be included with the application form. The remaining sections deal with the annual permit renewal. The permits are good for a year and need to be renewed with appeals, with suspensions and revocations, enforcement, and then fees and taxes. So I hope that I covered everything.
At this point, I think we're going to defer questions until after the public hearing, because I know there are going to be a series of comments made which will bounce questions to you. I would remind the public again that if you want to speak, this is your last chance to get a card in, next 30 seconds or so, and I'll turn it back to you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
On items 1, 2, and 3.
Right. I believe that all the cards are in. Thank you very much for the presentation. Public comment is now open.
So again, just to clarify, this is a joint commission city council hearing on items number 1 and 2 on the agenda.
Thank you, Tom.
You have the names? Yep.
All right, Stephanie Toolsey, and then Susan Weber Brown, and then Luke Wilson.
Okay. How do I get the timer up here now?
Hi, it's Towsley. I just had a quick question about the selection committee that it was one of the most recent slides. Selection panel to conduct ranking and scoring. And he mentioned people of industry and staff, and I was just suggesting that it could also include members of the community.
Tom.
Susan Weber Brown.
And Madam Vice Mayor, let me make one comment. For anybody who's commenting right now we're taking comments on item number 1 and number 2 on the agenda. So if you want to speak on item number 1 and 2, now's the time. Because item number 1 and 2, 1 is the Planning Commission, 2 is the City Council. It's the same item, but you've got 2 different groups that will be acting on it. Number 1 is the Planning Commission, number 2 is the City Council, but it's the same subject matter. 3 is coming up next.
If your name was called, could you please step up to the microphone?
Susan Weber Brown, Luke Wilson, and then Annie Terry.
To further clarify, though, what we will wind up doing is we will wind up having, right now is a hearing on the zoning, so talk to the zoning. Those who put 1, 2, and 3 down, we will call you back up to talk about the regulations.
You know what? I'm going to turn this over to somebody else. I'm on the zoning because mine's not about zoning.
All right, thank you.
So we need to recycle the card.
Luke Wilson, and then Annie Terry.
My question is for SCI and the Planning Commission. The ordinance states that indoor and mixed light is allowed. I'm assuming this means greenhouse.
Excuse me, could you please speak into the microphone, please? Thank you.
The ordinance states that indoor and mixed light are allowed. I'm assuming this means greenhouse. Is there any guidelines in the building codes for permitting and building greenhouses? And just looking for clarification if the intention is to allow greenhouse, and if so, do the building codes address the construction?
At this time, we're taking testimony or hearing your information on this. We're not getting into the ins and outs of the building code or anything like that. Those can be addressed at a later time with the building official.
Annie Terry, and then Stephen Terry, and then William Brom. I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher some last names.
I just wanted to mention one word that was mentioned during the presentation. Volatile. Anytime anything is volatile. I looked up the word volatile on the internet. It means liable to change rapidly and unpredictably, especially for the worse. My understanding would be then that we're talking probably about honey oil type products. I don't want to see anything zoned for those types of, oh gosh, we've all heard so many horrendous stories of people being injured in those types of manufacturing situations and scenarios. I just have a lot of concern about that. I also have a lot of concern about cleanup after a place is closed down for whatever reason. My husband used to manage an oil company in this town that received some kind of help through some Superfund site or something, some Superfund funds that the government set up in the past. I haven't heard of anything. Is there some kind of, I don't know if there's some kind of site management for that sort of a situation? Because there are contaminations and there are contaminants from a substance like this, especially if you're talking about honey oil. type operations and not just I mean, I used to live in Thermalito. There were grows all over my neighborhood.
Wow. Stephen Terry.
I would like to reserve mine for number 2. Yep, number 2 is right now. Yep. Yes.
Good evening. I find it kind of amazing as we sat here a few minutes ago during the council and we heard resolutions and agreements for providing school resources officers at our schools. They're the most important resource. We have National Night Out, Stay Away from Drugs, tonight. And here we are considering this again. Folks, I'm going to tell you what, I've been in one of those houses with the fire department that got rocked by honey oil. I've seen the devastation. It's destructive. Houses are knocked off their foundation. That's how bad this stuff is. I don't agree with it. I think we're still at the edge. We can stop this. It needs to be stopped now. Our kids are our most precious resource. And anyone who thinks that our kids aren't going to face this is wrong. Thank you.
William Byram, Fred Spencer, Spinger, and then Eric Smith.
All right, thank you, William Bynum. I just want to commend the council on doing such a thorough job of going through these processes, and I think the consultant's doing an outstanding job, and everything seems to me to be rational, straightforward, and I think you're doing a terrific job, and so thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Oh, Fred Spinger. I would urge the council to a more cooperative stance on the cannabis initiative, not obstruction. I would like to see the council move on investigating further revenue streams. I would like to see the council hold large entities like DWR, PG&E, and even Butte County accountable for just compensation when it is due. A few weeks ago, I mentioned Elon Musk. There was laughter and derision. Well, 2 weeks later, Elon Musk was on the phone with Flint, Michigan Mayor Karen Weaver. I used Elon Musk as a metaphor for brainstorming and reaching out for ideas to help our city thrive. Thank you.
Eric Smith, Bill Spear, and then David Pittman.
Council, thank you for this opportunity to speak. It's going to be a little personal, but with a point. Mr. Della Rosario, publicly, you've made it clear that you're very concerned about chemicals. You support, in fact, a complete fossil fuel ban in California. The fact is that if we followed your advice, it would cost the state millions and millions of dollars in revenue. In fact, Bakersfield would become non-existent. You also, commendably, were involved in the war on dioxin, an industrial chemical that was a huge problem here in Oroville, and I greatly commend you for that, and thank you, because chemicals are a huge issue. Ironically, though, when you look at this particular burgeoning industry, there's lots of unknown factors that we just don't know yet. I mean, the scientists don't know yet. And so you're ready to set aside fossil fuels, you're ready to set aside dioxins and chemicals from industries of yesteryear that were here in Oroville, and the unintended consequences, we just don't know. The facts are not in yet. American Chemical Society says this: researchers report that marijuana smoke contains significantly higher levels of several toxic compounds, including ammonia and hydrogen cyanide, than tobacco smoke, and may therefore pose similar health risks. Scientists found that ammonia levels were 20 times higher in marijuana. And it goes on and on and on about chemicals. We all know that chemicals are a big deal in this industry. The science isn't in yet. I say don't until we have more information. You are ready to do it to the oil industry, do it to marijuana. Thank you.
Bill Spear, and then Dave Pittman.
City Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and I agree with Eric. I put a
blue card in for the approval of the agenda. Somehow I got skipped, but I was going to suggest that we just put this off for a couple months and let till election comes, and then it'll be a mandate from the people. If you guys make it through the election, then the people wanted it. We don't have to go through no special election putting it on the ballot. Real simple fix. This is really confusing. There, you know, I tried looking up online and of the back council meetings, and it's hard to understand. It's a special meeting, this, and a joint meeting. What's that? Are they all going to be joint meetings now? Get it? Cannabis joint. 350 pages. As people want to contribute to the city and study the issues, how can you, if we get notified on Friday, read through 350 pages and make any kind of contribution? You guys are pushing this through, and you need to wait. You need to give it a couple months, wait till the elections are passed, and then revisit it. If you make it through, then the city wanted it. We should not be forcing this on. We should go slower, examine the steps, because lives are at stake, families are at stake, kids are at stake. It's serious stuff what you guys are considering.
Dave Pittman, Candy Grubbs, John Miller George.
And Mr. Pittman, before you go, let me please remind all the speakers, please address the council and not individuals. Not that you were going to do that.
My name is Dave Pittman. Good afternoon or good evening. I'll be brief. Some of you might be shocked about that. I think the classic issue is in Mr. Lando's background report. He says the state law allows to prohibit or allow. And that's the choice you have here tonight, to prohibit or allow, especially in the case of zoning. A couple items I'll raise. It doesn't seem to be there's any armed security at the cultivation sites. My information, my experience tells me that's where the conflict arises. There ought to be armed security at the cultivation sites or the growing sites. There also is another point. The outdoor grow suggestion seems to be floating around there. I don't know if there's a little catchphrase in here, but I totally believe that you should never allow any outdoor grow, period. Just flat out. Again, this continues to be a bad idea. I really don't see much evidence this is going to be a betterment to the community. The other thing about science is that your sanitation department or your sewer department doesn't even have state standards to accept the effluent from these retail grows or manufacturing or whatever. They don't even have any standards yet. So you're willing to risk your sewer plant and all the bugs down there? I think we ought to take a few moments to make sure the state has standards first before we accept this. Thank you.
Candy Grubbs, John Miller George, Don Foltz.
Good evening, council members and planning commission members. Some of you know me, others do not. I came here tonight because I grew up here, and I'm a little bit taken back at what is going on. Many of you have, in fact all of you have, the lessons learned after 4 years of marijuana legalization in Colorado and Washington. I hope you read it. Rising rates of pot use on minors, increasing arrest rates of minors, especially Black and Hispanic. Higher rates of traffic deaths from driving while high. More marijuana-related poisonings and hospitalization, a persistent black market that may now involve increased Mexican cartel, and which the Mexican cartel is out there in the countryside. In the meantime, the promises of tax revenue windfalls and decreased crime have not materialized. Tax revenue comprises a tiny fraction of Colorado state budget, less than 1%, and the cost of enforcement are subtracted. The remaining revenue is very limited. So you're not going to get it. You're going to need a lot more of your safety personnel. Colorado and Washington legalized marijuana. Regular use of drug among children 12 to 17 has both risen above the national average and is rising faster than the national average. Colorado now ranks #1 in marijuana use by minors. Thank you. I hope you read it because it is put out by the University of Colorado, Denver, Johns Hopkins University, Harvard Medical School, the Children's Hospital of Boston,
Thank
and
you, ma'am.
University of Kansas. Please read it.
John Miller George, Don Foltz, and then Bobby O'Reilly.
I think all these regulations are a little bit too strict. You're not dealing with nuclear waste here. The sewage system in my town manages to handle the waste from my little 6-plant grow just fine. Nothing happened. The biggest problem that you're going to have is that how are you going to make the regulations such that anybody can make their business home here? If not, they'll go somewhere else. I looked at the micro business thing, and that's small family farmers who process their own, deliver their own. And you're taxing them higher. And you're regulating them like they're some kind of giant enterprise that can afford to lay out thousands of dollars of license fees and wait for months. So we have lots of people here who are scared of volatile stuff. They don't even use volatiles anymore. They use CO2 and liquid nitrogen. Neither one of them are explosive. I rest my case.
Don Foltz.
Jackie, who's next?
Bobby O'Reilly, and then Stephanie Toolsey. Towsley. Sorry, I will get it by the end of this.
Thank you.
I'm pleased the council seems to be moving forward in a reasonable manner on this. On the issue of volatility, there's probably no manufacturer industry in town that isn't using volatile substances. So to think that this is going to be something new is ridiculous. The honey oil explosions in houses, that's a concern to me, which is why we don't need it going on in houses. It should be in a regulated facility if it's going to be happening at all. One of the things that I got from the presentation that really stuck out was that other people from other communities are within their legal rights to come and deliver their product, market their product here, and then take the tax dollars from it back home with them. This isn't anything new in our community. Pot has been prevalent for half a century. And I just think that if it's going to be here, it should be regulated, it should be taxed. As far as zoning goes, I don't want to be taking my kids or grandkids down to a round table and have a pot shop right next door. So I hope when zoning considerations, even at the dispensary level, not at the manufacturing level, I'm hoping it can be maybe even more regulated than alcohol, where you can have a liquor store anywhere, and it can be kind of pushed out a little bit. Thanks.
Bobby O'Reilly, Stephanie Towsley, James Townsend.
All right, well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Bobby O'Reilly. My concerns kind of piggyback off letters that were sent to council and to staff from Jessica. I have some concerns. As we all know, the 5 have made their mind up. It's going to be here. There's no stopping it. There's no turning back. It's a done deal. So if it's a done deal, I would hope that you can look at the regulations, look at the ordinance very closely. Like I said, piggyback off some things that Jessica mentioned as far as distances, for instance, 600 feet from schools. Add the licensed daycare facilities, which people run out of their homes, religion places, churches, schools, parks, anything that has to do with children. That would be amazing. I do appreciate the fact that it was mentioned that these are not going to be allowed in historic downtown Oroville. That is a plus. That is about the only thing from the stakeholders meeting that carried on to the ordinance that was discussed. So please look at what is written very close, make some changes before you approve, and that would be appreciated.
Stephanie? Okay. James Townsend, Chuck Reynolds, and then Brad White.
James Townsend lived out of the area for many years, planning on moving back, and finally downsized and moved back. And faced with this, I cannot believe that the city of Oroville would even consider a thing that would take the infrastructure just and destroy it. These are our children that you're talking about. Don't think for 1 minute that it won't get to the children. If you do, you're sadly mistaken. And if you're exchanging our children for money, that is disgraceful. It's phenomenal that you would consider 12, that you would put police in the schools, which I think should be done, and turn around and accept a situation like this, bringing an industry into our city that is going to just make it a cesspool.
Bobby O'Reilly, or sorry, Chuck, oh my gosh, Chuck Reynolds, and then Brad White, and that's the last 2 speaker cards.
Who is the last speaker, please?
Brad White.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Well, it didn't take us long to get here, did it? Just a couple of months ago, we were considering cannabis, and now here we are. We're going for outdoor grows and no tax is what I'm hearing considered, because we didn't want it to be to run anybody off, any business. Well, I mentioned to you before, when you open this door, it's like opening the door of a submarine. And once you find out that it's too much for you to handle, you're not going to be able to close it. But I implore you to make the right decision. But you know, to tell you the truth, I don't even know why we're all here. Why you guys should just print in the paper what you decided and quit wasting our time of coming to these meetings, because it's obvious that your minds are set. But the thing about going downhill is you tend to pick up speed, and things are happening pretty quickly now. Thank you.
Brad White.
Hello. First of all, I wanted to say, you know, Oroville's a great town. We got to start remembering that Oroville is a fantastic town. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to grow up in. And I wanted to say that I believe that the city of Oroville, the voters have spoken before on how they feel about marijuana and marijuana being in our town. As a real estate agent, I know I have shown properties during certain times of year where the people got out of their car and decided no, they cannot buy it because there's a smell from the house next door. Or, you know, you can tell that they're growing next door. And, you know, having a commercial cannabis would not stop that. There's always going to be a market for that because, hey, if you're going to tax it, then what do you stop people from growing it at home and getting rid of that tax? So I just wanted to say, let's instead, and again, as several people have said before, let's believe that we are a good city, that, you know, God loves the city, God loves us, God's hand can be covered us, but we don't want to lose that. We don't want to do things that will just drive us away from God and drive us away from being the good city that we can be, the best city in Oroville, in California.
Thank you, everyone. The public comment portion of the meeting. Yes.
So I would clarify that again, we have closed the hearing on the zoning. Council will now hold the hearing on the regulations. We will go through the list again with people who asked to speak on number 3, which is regulations. I would make 2 points. One is, if you've already made your point, I think we heard it. Second of all, it is on the regulations, not the zoning, so that we'll try as staff try and clarify when you stray from that issue. But the point would be now it's time to open the hearing on the regulations.
Ross Hunt, Stephanie Towsley, Pamela L. Okay.
Mr. Lando, so does this mean that we're on number 2? Is that for clarification?
We're on number 3.
Okay, because it
So
says
we had the joint hearing with the commission and council, so we had a hearing for both, and now we're having the hearing on the regulations.
Okay, I'm just looking at the paper here and noticing there's a recess, and also wondering in the process here when we'll actually hear from the commissioners if they're going to be speaking.
That will be right after this hearing.
Okay.
The name is Rose Hunt.
Oh, Rose, okay.
And I just wanted to thank you for bringing this forward and actually doing something for the state of California. It's about time we've done this. People have known and smoked pot for centuries. In this country, it's been almost 60 years. And it's about time that you stepped forward and did something actually great to help this area out. I have been to Oregon quite a lot because I have grandchildren there. And I had to point out, my daughter does not smoke pot, never has. That is her choice. I do. I had to point out the places to her because she didn't know where they were. She lives in the town. But really, she wasn't aware of that they were even there because she's not involved. So a lot of the hoopla is crazy. And these same people that are worried about it were racing cars drunk as skunks up and down the streets of Oroville just 50 years ago. So you have to consider that. But I'm really proud of you for stepping forward and doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Stephanie Towsley, Pamela L., and then Jessica McKenzie.
Hi, Stephanie Towsley. The one thing that I wanted to address is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I hear a lot of fear tonight. And I understand it, and I understand that we've been trained to fear change all the time. But we are here to try to mitigate any of those fears. We're here to regulate it. We're here to tax it. We're here to adopt it in a way that will be the safest for everyone involved. And in an effort to protect children, at the moment there is nothing. Our kids are smoking pot as much as they want, whenever they want. Please do not delude yourself to think that a 13-year-old doesn't know where and when to find pot right now. So please, let's be reasonable and understand that this is a way that it can be a revenue source for the city when we desperately need it. Thanks.
Pamela L., Jessica McKenzie, Chuck Reynolds.
Thank you, Council. My name is Pam Leese, and I just wanted to say a few things.
Excuse me, Pam, I would like you to speak into the microphone so we can all hear you. Thank you.
I just want to mention a few things. Listening to some of the crowd tonight, you would think we're redoing Prohibition. I live about 4 blocks from a winery that has alcohol that's volatile. We haven't burned up yet. Anyhow, I just want to say thank you for putting this on the agenda, letting us speak our minds. I think it's time that Oroville benefit from tax revenues. Nevada is astoundingly exceeding all expectations of the money they were going to get from their marijuana sales. That's all I wanted to say. I don't think that we should be putting this through Prohibition times because the state of California voted to legalize marijuana in this state. Thank you.
Jessica McKenzie, Chuck Reynolds, Susan Weber Brown.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There are so many things that I would like to say. I'd like to reassure a lot of people in the audience who have a lot of genuine fear, and I unfortunately don't have the time to address them all. I wish I could, because so many of them are unwarranted. I have provided to the council and staff the recommendations that I and my organization have made to tighten up the ordinance that is in front of you. I should start by saying I think that SCI has done a really good foundational job with what they've put together, so I appreciate their efforts. You all have my recommendations. The only one I'm going to talk to tonight is to make a clear distinction between storefront retail and delivery services. Those should not be treated as one entity. They should not be capped as one entity. They accomplish two entirely different things, have two entirely different business models. Most dispensaries that I'm aware of now, storefronts, don't want to do delivery because it's a whole different business model with drivers and vehicles, and it's different. It's an extra added burden. Those people also reach the community that can't get in their cars and go to a store, but the store reaches people who need a place to come and get advice and guidance and information. They are different. Please treat them differently and don't cap deliveries under dispensaries. Thank you all very much.
Chuck Reynolds, Susan Weber Brown, and then Bobby O'Reilly.
Well, there's been some talk about fear. You know, I feel that good, healthy fear is a good thing. But what I'm sitting here wondering about, since we're talking about fear, is what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of not being provided for? We don't need to sell drugs to make money. Believe me, there's a lot of other avenues. If you've exhausted all of your resources, all of your ideas, I understand. But please step aside for those of us who haven't. We have ideas. This isn't a good one.
Susan Weber Brown, Bobby O'Reilly, and then Don Foltz.
I too will be very brief. I haven't been to a meeting in many, many years other than to watch my daughter get sworn in, my daughter-in-law. But I've worked narcotics for most of my career, for 37 years. I worked very closely with two of our council members and a third council member who assisted me on many cases. And I don't think that anybody's here out of fear. I think that we all are smart, intelligent folks. We read the newspapers, we see the studies that are coming from all the other states. And if you're like me, I have visited and trained in most of those states: Washington, Alaska, Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, where marijuana has been legalized. And I will tell you, it's not exaggerated when they talk about the issues that are in those cities now. And very little of the money that they expected to receive is going to what it actually was intended for, because of the cost of all the other factors that happened as a result of bringing marijuana in. So I will say that I'm going to end. I've got a number of handouts, and there is one video that I'd like everybody to go to and watch. It's called Chronic State. It was done by Idaho, the state of Idaho, Idaho Drug Free. I've got a flyer on that too. It's 45-minute, 50-minute video that should tell you and answer all your questions. Thank you.
Don Foltz, and then Bobby asked to be removed, so John Miller George, and then Candace Grubbs. Okay. So John Miller George.
I think he left.
Okay. Candy Grubbs, David Pittman, and then Bill Spear.
I too recognize that you're between a rock and a hard spot. The city of Oroville doesn't have enough resources, but there are other ways to do it. And what bothers me is the reports in this that marijuana and the drugs that we have here, there's a relationship to homelessness. And since I grew up here, I know a lot of these homeless people that are here did not grow up here. They've come in from someplace. So I really want you to think, once you open up the door, you can't go back. You know, you really can't. And I think that we really need to take a look at the crime and marijuana and the relationship between all of this. And I would think that, especially those of you that have been in law enforcement and others, the two just don't mix that well. We have medical marijuana, that's great. And people can grow some, but what I see out in the foothills and around here is abominable, and you're not going to be able to control it here in town. So I thank you.
Dave Pittman, Bill Spear, and then Eric Smith.
Thank you again. Council, speaking to the regulations, I didn't see any discussion in there to prohibit the sale or enticement to our youth. There's nothing to stop the candied items, the drink items, those things that actually cause damage to our youth. I think that's a reasonable thing to put in the rules. There's no discussion about the intensity of the product. You know, in the alcohol regulations, you have a very clear thing on every bottle. What's the intensity of the alcohol? What's the intensity of marijuana? Has it even been identified? Is it put on the packaging? I don't know. If it isn't, it should be in our regulations to carry that out, because no one knows what you're buying when you're buying it. The unwritten consequences, or excuse me, unintended consequences of this are just beyond the time allowed here. But I'm not speaking from fear. My issue is 35 years of working the streets of this community as a firefighter, and it predates the time when we ever used rubber gloves. I worked on people under the influence at vehicle wrecks, over 300 in my career, that were because of even alcohol-related injuries. And we have such terrible experience with alcohol enforcement. Why do you think we can have a good experience with marijuana enforcement? It just defies my intelligence. Not a good idea. It's too early. This needs to be sat down and rethought about. Thank you.
Bill Spear, Eric Smith, and then Fred Spinger.
The regulations. Our city is already short-staffed. Our police are already overworked. People are doing 2 or 3 jobs, and we're going to give them more regulations. We need to figure out how to tighten our belt and try to do less instead of making more issues and more problems when the growers are getting robbed, and the extra crime and all the issues that it's going to bring to our city, and we're already stretched thin. You can't regulate, you can't stretch any wider than you're stretched. We need to get rid of regulations. We already got too many regulations. We've got to do less so that we can do a better job on the stuff that we have. We have a beautiful river and a beautiful lake, and we neglect the gifts that we have to try to bring in something that we don't even have the resources in the first place to fulfill the regulations. We have homeless people up and down the street. You don't have to go very far to see regulations not working. We need to not continue to put more on and think that we're going to be able to cover it. It's not going to work.
Eric Smith, and then William Bynum is our last speaker.
Council, again, thank you for this opportunity. I am very concerned and somewhat fearful, and let me tell you why. I represent indirectly, I work for the 3rd largest employer here in town. I just met with my HR director. I just met, in fact, a few minutes ago across the street with our new school superintendent, and they're very concerned. Let me tell you why. We can't find people that pass the drug test. Now, we all know it's a few percent if we go with, those in the cannabis industry, just a few percent. The few percent is going to put Oroville over the edge. We just can't fill the slots, folks. And we know Oroville has a history of drug challenges. And I just feel that going here is going to put us over the edge in the business community, being able to fill those slots. We have workman's comp issues, and the list goes on and on. You guys are very smart people, and I believe you are well-read, and that's why I'm going to challenge you with this. Being former law enforcement, social work, educator in schools, I think you owe it to the folks to explain your rationale here tonight. I'd like to hear from you, because, you know, we can sit here and go all night, oh my goodness, and parse this out. But I'd like to understand your thinking, your rationale. I'd like to hear from you how you've made the leap. When I read your candidacy claims, and you know, when you were going to run for back in 2014, I've gone through the various documents that you all had produced, and there's a disconnect here for me. The people you are here today, in pastor's wife, teacher, social work, there's just a huge disconnect. So help me here. Just help me a little bit. Help the folks understand how you got here. I'd appreciate it very, very much. Thank you.
William Bynum is our last speaker.
All right. Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't going to speak again, but I thought I would, because Stephanie brought up fear, uncertainty, doubt. The acronym is FUD, and it's a marketing tool to try to destroy your competition. And that's what I keep hearing: fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and no facts, some anecdotal recollections, no facts. And I admire the fact that you, council members, have sat through this over and over again. I was here back in December or January when we went past midnight, same people saying the same things, fudding it up, fear, uncertainty, doubt, nothing new. And you continue to have to put yourselves through this. So I admire your stamina and appreciate the fact that you're rational and hearing everybody. And I really appreciate the fact you cut it down to 90 seconds, saved us all a lot of wasted time. Thank you very much.
The public comment for this hearing is now closed. Planning Chair.
At this point, the commission would debate and decide, as is shown on the agenda, whether to recommend amendment to the zoning ordinance to include this with whatever amendments you like, or recommend the council not adopt it.
Well, then we're going to have some discussion amongst the commissioners. We have one commissioner here who has something else to share. And Mr. Chair of the Planning Commission, if I might, let me remind the public and members of the council and everybody who's watching this, this is a time for the Planning Commission to discuss and not for public comment or commentary or shouting out. This is not a ball game, so shouting out things that from the audience would not be appropriate at this point in time.
And if the commissioners could make sure their microphones are on when they speak. And I think you get to share mics, sorry.
Can you get past me? Am I on?
You are.
Okay. I have two comments. The first is having to do with the ordinance. The way the ordinance reads, if a cannabis business goes into a commercially zoned parcel, say along Feather River Boulevard, it prohibits at that point anyone within 600 feet of that business establishing a daycare center. Mm-hmm. And what I've done, and it's very rough, I didn't have a whole lot of time, put together a map that shows roughly, very roughly, the area that would be prohibited for daycare centers if a cannabis business has gone in near a residential, because the ordinance prohibits cannabis from being near schools and the rest of that, but it's not prohibited from being near residentially zoned property that would allow a daycare center. And I didn't hand a I forgot to hand one to you guys. Sorry about that. So I would propose, at the very least, that I would propose that the ordinance incorporate that a cannabis business cannot locate within so many feet of a residentially zoned property. Simply because there is a crying need for daycare facilities. As more and more families become two employees, there's a need for children to be taken care of, and 90% of those, that's a number I just made up, but 90% of those go into daycare facilities. And yet, right in downtown, if you look at the map, where there could be a crying need, there's schools there for daycare facilities. Now, the other problem I have with this is that I feel that the hearing, the noticing of this hearing is faulty, because those areas shown on the map, those people were not notified of this hearing. Now, I understand that, you know, state law says in mass affected areas in a rezone, all that's needed is notice in the paper, etc. But this is not a mass. This is a fairly localized area in the city that would be affected unbeknownst to the people who are living in those homes. And I can make up a scenario where someone in the 600-foot area has been thinking about opening a daycare facility. There's a need for it, and come to find out that they can't, and never knew of this ordinance being adopted because they weren't notified. So I have, I'm sure, I'm not an attorney, Mr. Huber's here, but I just feel that those areas, residential areas that are within 600 feet of areas that would permit, by use permit, a cannabis operation, should have been noticed. That's item one. Item two, I've heard a lot of debate, and no one seems to want to deal with it. But the federal government does not allow what it is we're proposing to do. If I got that straight, it's not allowed by federal law. And I have a problem doing anything. You know, if it's not allowed and everybody wants it, then change the law. That's what we're here. That's the kind of government we have. If you don't like a law, get together, change it. Well, until it's changed so that federal and state are treated the same way, like cigarette smoking, okay? Federal law doesn't prohibit it. State law doesn't prohibit it, okay? I don't mind approving a facility that would sell cigarettes. But I have a problem adopting anything that breaks the law. And you can hide from that, you can bury your head in the sand, but that is something that I just cannot do. Thank you. Oh, you have to share that.
Before we move on, does staff want to address the noticing subject?
Well, certainly. I guess a couple points. One is the noticing is legal. I understand what's being said, and I don't want to, cut the thread there. The bigger point, though, is, well, 2 points. One is certainly the commission could say X number of feet from residential zones, so you could add that. That's number one. But number two is, as was emphasized, it would take a conditional use permit for a business, and the adjoining owners would at that point be individually noticed.
And before we move on,
Could you please speak into the mic? Thank you.
before we move on, there was a question that was posed by a member of the audience that was not answered. Gary, would you like to answer that regarding the mixed lighting? Do you remember the question?
Yeah, this is Gary Lehman, Chief Building Official, Fire Marshal for the City of Oroville. The question was, is there building codes for greenhouses? There are no specific building codes for greenhouses. However, if there's non-conventional wood framing, it requires engineered design. So therefore, the building can be designed through engineering design, just like you see most of your buildings. A lot of time downtown San Francisco and those that are coming in, all glass. Those aren't in the building code. However, they're an engineered design.
Thank you. Commissioner Jenkins?
I feel like we were very rushed on this, having just received this information on Friday and then just receiving another handout today. There's several more questions I have, and I'd like, would this be contingent on the ballot approval?
If that's directed at me, that would be a council decision, which presumably they'll talk about after the commission acts.
Okay, because
that has been discussed.
One of the handouts I received said it was a condition, and then another one didn't. So I've got several handouts that don't agree.
You're right. That's a subject of discussion. You're correct.
One of the handouts again said that minors under 18 would be allowed inside without a parent. I don't believe that should be allowed. I guess that would be on our zoning.
No. Doesn't say that.
But I have received.
Let's keep the comments to yourselves, please. Thank you.
I have received several handouts though, so I'm not sure which is the most current. And some don't list as many items as the previous. I'd also like to see this farther than 600 feet buffer. 600 feet is less than half of one lap around a track. That's not very far. I would recommend at least a quarter mile, one lap around a track, still not very far. Possibly adding parks and churches to that also. On the last updated handout we got, it says a minimum of 3 cannabis retail businesses. I believe that needs to be maximum.
That was clarified to maximum. I'm sorry.
I believe we also need to address the signage. We have that issue a lot in our planning commission. We probably shouldn't allow a sign like McDonald's has. We should have very discreet signage, and that may be something to go over in greater depth at another time. I also believe that there should be no locations of any of these within the downtown historic overlay. And maybe somebody from the sewer commission could comment on if water monitoring is needed. I believe the grand jury report for Shasta Lake suggested something like that. And I think that's all that I have for right now. But that's several things to go over.
I just want to mention there was a handout by SCORE, and I just don't have access to that right now, but they did weigh in.
Well, I think that would be something we'd like to see.
There's a lot of information.
If it's available. Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with most of what Commissioner Jenkins has said. I printed out the information on Friday. We had a little time to review the actual, there's been so many, and then we got an amended package literally earlier today when I picked it up, and there is some conflicting information in there. I agree about the setbacks. from the schools. 600 feet seems to be a concern. And I'd also like to, I think, information about the school parks and maybe churches should be included in that also. But yeah, no, I'd like more time to review the information that would be approving tonight. That's kind of where I'm standing.
Commissioner McDevitt, Commissioner Brand?
No, everything's been pretty much said.
So what is the feeling of the commission on making decisions? The general feeling that you want more time?
That's my opinion, is I'd like more time to review the information. That's my...
I don't believe we can make a good decision with the amount of time that we've had.
If I had to make a decision based on what has been presented right now without more time, I definitely have to recommend. Oh, there I go. Sorry. Without more time to really analyze it, there's no doubt I would recommend denial. And I may do that anyway because of the law issue with the federal law, but definitely there's no way I could, in good conscience, make a decision tonight, having just received all of this Friday and then updates today. It just can't be done.
Well, if there's a motion to either make a decision or continue it, because I think we're all in the same boat of wanting more time to review the information. Is there a motion?
Do we make a motion now as a commission to do something?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you could make a motion to continue, deny, or make changes.
Yeah.
I'm opening for a motion.
I would move then that at the very least we continue this for a month, give us time to digest all of this and talk to staff and talk to other people that are interested to come to a decision. I may, after all of that, still vote against it.
So is your motion to continue it for a month?
Yep.
Okay, there's a motion to continue it for a month. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion, a second. Please open the voting. We don't have our standard voting thing, so you have to do it verbally, I guess.
Yeah, I just realized that. Let me. Sorry. Commissioner Brand? Commissioner Chapman?
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Jenkins?
Yes.
Commissioner McDevitt?
Yes.
Vice Chair Durling?
Yes.
And Chairperson Robinson?
Yes.
And motion carries.
All right. The joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the Oroville City Council is now adjourned, and I suggest that we break for 5 minutes.
We did our best.
Hey. All right.
Well, we don't have to stay for the rest of the day.
Our first joint meeting ever. That's our first joint meeting ever. Our first joint meeting. Yeah. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I had Durling and then Brand for the vote. Everyone was yes, but I did it in order, so I did Brand, Chapman, Jenkins, McDevitt. And I called him Robinson when I did roll call.
bribed the planning commission. They only bribed the council.
Yeah, I even got a couple. I haven't got a
Hope
couple.
that mic wasn't on. How you doing, Scott?
Oroville's been very polite about this whole process, especially given how contentious it is. I don't feel people are necessarily beating each other up. I think everybody has.
It's happening up there. Is where it's happening.
I think you might be right, because everybody seems very respectful otherwise.
Messed up their life and everything else. It's like alcohol. I used to drink and find out that I got drunk and stuff and didn't know what I was doing and everything. Same with marijuana. Everybody in this room is voting for it. I don't want to hear nothing. But when somebody that done smoke marijuana get behind the wheel, kill one of their family members, then they want to prosecute that person. They want to vote it in, or they need to shut up and don't say nothing. That's the way I feel about it. You vote this in, but until your family member get killed because somebody smoking the stuff and get behind the wheel, shut your mouth up and vote.
No, I like it that everybody, and that's okay, I like it that everybody is willing to have a dialogue about it, you know, that they're willing to talk.
Was it LaDonna?
D-O-N-A. I bet so too. Who is the gal?
Oh. Oh, that's all right. They know who you mean.
No.
Well, I figure we've done our best. If we go bankrupt, we go bankrupt.
We're back from recess.
We've tried.
Shh.
Oh, sad. I think it worked.
Nope.
Got your attention.
Sorry, I was reading my.
Attorney Huber, I'm going to defer to you on this introduction of the ordinance.
Madam Vice Mayor, as to item number 2, because of the action that the Planning Commission took, the City Council can introduce the item. Because remember, it takes 2 readings for an ordinance to be in effect. This item can be introduced subject to changes that the Planning Commission makes or subject to rejection that the Planning Commission may take. Whatever action the Planning Commission takes can either be brought to the council or can be overturned by the council. So the item can be introduced subject to whatever modifications that the Planning Commission may make or rejection of the ordinance, of the proposed ordinance by the council. So it would be appropriate to proceed at this time with item number 2, subject to the action of the Planning Commission.
All right. I'm looking for a motion and a second.
I have one thing here that I need clarification on. And it's under section 4 of the ordinance, and it was brought up by the Planning Commission. A sign shall be posted on the door or in view of the entrance stating that no person under the age of 18 for medical cannabis uses or 21 for recreational cannabis use is allowed on site. And here's the part that gets me. Unless accompanied by his or her parent or documented legal guardian. I can't go for that. I can't see if I was going to use that facility to walk in there with my 6-year-old granddaughter on my arm and take her into that facility. That's just not going to work for me. And that's what this says, that you can do that. Now that's what I'm saying. Now, and if the attorney can correct me and say, no, that's not what it means, then that's fine. But what it means to me, reading that, I can't live with that.
I think your interpretation is a fair reading of what it does say. This body can modify or amend it. You can move this forward, wait to see what the Planning Commission does, because they may make that modification as well. That's certainly something we can put on the radar, to look at. But your reading, if you're asking me a question, is did you read that correctly? Is your interpretation correct? I think it is. I think that's a fair reading of it.
And I would just say that based on what Mr. Huber said, that Mr. Hatley, if you'd like to remove that, you can strike that.
Right. This is a fluid
phrase,
document.
Yeah.
so that the age limits are just there.
There's absolutely no way, and I'm just telling you right up front.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, but I'm the guy sitting here, and there is no way I can live with that. I just can't. So if that were removed out of that, then move it forward, and then we'll see what the Planning Commission comes up with and that kind of thing. But that has to go, or I can't vote for this.
And I'm in agreement with that. I don't see any reason
I believe all
children
of us are.
would need to go in. I mean, I don't approve of children going into a place that sells liquor either. So, or
So what I'm
cigarettes.
hearing, and you can certainly
Strike.
tell me I'm wrong, what I'm
Yeah.
hearing is a motion to introduce striking the phrase unless accompanied by his or her parent or documented legal guardian. That would be struck.
I believe that's the consensus of the council. Thank you, Councilman Hatley. I just did not see you in the queue.
And thank you for pointing that out.
Councilman Thompson is in the queue.
I have a couple concerns in this, how it's written currently. One of the reasons, from my understanding and recollection, that this was not open to public vote was for the control. I believe that was the primary concern that actually Hatley brought up, that if it went to public vote, any change or a cease and desist would have to go to public vote. So from memory, one of the primary purposes of having it in a council decision was to have that cease and desist clause in there. Currently, I do not see any clause in there that if for any reason City Council decided that we no longer wanted to have this industry in town, that there would be any way of making that happen. Am I incorrect in that? Maybe you can quantify that for me.
Happy to. There are two things that are in the proposed ordinance that does that. Number one, if someone opens and I'll use the term dispensary for just sake of discussion. If someone opens a dispensary, the first thing that happens is they are not granted a property right in that license. It is a license only. It is not a property right. And the reason why that's important is because once you're granted a property right, that property right continues ad infinitum until you cease the use of it voluntarily. So licenses are not given a property right in this regulation, number one. Number two, licenses exist for only 1 year. So at the end of the year, they have to renew. If this council or a subsequent council decides we don't want cannabis anymore, they would be able to say we're stopping it, and then as all the licenses expire, they would not be renewed. So that is in the.
So with the concern with what happened with Calaveras County, the industry went after the city when it changed its mind. So you're saying with how it's worded in this ordinance that the city's protected from those lawsuits.
You would not be the next Calaveras. You would be protected from that.
One thing, thank you for that clarification. One thing as well that was brought up in your discussion from both the public and from our city officials is greenhouses for cultivation. I would like to see some stricter guidelines in regards to what is allowed in the cultivation aspect of it, because from my reading of it, there is wording in regards to no visible signs on the outside or smell that's happening inside, and I'm not sure how that would take place in a greenhouse where you pretty much see everything that's going on inside, besides it's opaque or whatnot. But unless there's a greenhouse that's looks like a steel building that I've never seen. Usually greenhouses are allow as most light in as possible. So I'd love to see some changes in the ordinance in regards to that. Another item that I would love to see in this ordinance is in regards to the protection and advertisement to youth. Often you see in these dispensaries with the different products that are inside, the wording and the advertisement is often childish or cartoonish in nature, that can be very much seen as something aimed at towards children. So I would like to see something in the ordinance in regards to that, as far as how things can be labeled. Also, the security of the packaging that listed in there specifically in regards to the safety of kids once products are home. That Ziploc bags or whatnot, that kids can't easily access it. There, obviously, it's in the parents' control at that point, but at least that we're doing our due diligence when this goes forward. And I love what one of the commissioners said, in good conscience, that those that decide to move this forward can do so with as much good conscience as possible. And also some clarification in regards to the recommendation for law enforcement. From my understanding, one of the maybe things that came forward with the grand jury report in regards to previous cities that have passed this, that they did not increase the law enforcement in conjunction with the opening of dispensaries. I would like to see the comparison from our staff in regards to the recommendation for how many officers. On our end, I know that the dispensaries are going to have their own security, but I would like to see some comparison as far as what is projected to come through and how many officers that we should hire based on the past ordinance and the subsequent cost of those officers. And also, I believe Mr. Pittman brought up how the cultivation often are are big targets for burglary, and so to include with them that they are to provide their own security 24/7, so that it does not add more weight on our already overstressed officers to take care of that for them. That's just the beginning, but I hope that this council does thoroughly listen to our planning commission and all the things that they brought forward. I thought were good items, good concerns that we should look at and hopefully adopt into this ordinance, should it pass. Thank you.
So, the ordinance has been introduced with recommendations in regards to amendments, and there's no other council person in the queue. I'm looking for a motion with amendments in a second.
Just for clarification, this is the first reading, right? So this has to come back a second time.
That is
Absolutely.
correct.
Can you
This is just
clarify
the
this
first-
process for me? I know that, so it's to be approved tonight and then approved a second time? Is that how it goes?
It technically is introduced tonight, and that way the public, the intent is that way the public gets to understand what's being introduced, what council's talking about. Then at a subsequent meeting, I believe it has to be at least 5 days apart, but at a subsequent meeting, then the council would, in fact, after getting planning commission's recommendation, would be able to act on the ordinance. I would say that if there's substantive changes, we'd have to examine how that process worked.
I really, I'm not the only one I know in the community that feels the whole process has been rushed, and especially now that the ordinance has actually been issued. I hope that as a council that we choose to listen to Planning Commission and delay it for the 30 days that they requested.
I'm looking for a motion in a second, and I believe Scott
So as I heard
So
it,
can you?
right, as I heard it at this point, the motion that was at least discussed, I mean, I don't want to make the motion, but at least the words were taken out unless accompanied by his or her parent or documented legal guardian.
And so once again, I'm looking for a motion and a second on that with the amendment.
Is that it?
I'm trying to find it. We have so many.
It's page 5, and it's under E. It's under E,
Yeah.
signs, and it's number 2.
So I know I heard just now that the motion in regards to, in addition to the amendment that Mr. Hatley said, is that, is the clarification I'm looking for right now, does that mean all of the recommendations that I just brought forth are not listened to? Is that correct?
That is correct in terms of this motion. There is no motion. That is correct in terms of this discussion. I'm sorry. Let me clarify that.
And so,
Okay, I move that we accept Resolution 8731, a resolution of the City Council authorizing, directing the interim city administrator to...
Can I interrupt you, Marlene? I'm sorry. But at this point, we're talking about Ordinance 1830 and the introduction of 1830. You would then, whatever you do with that, you would then talk about the regulations.
I can't find 1830.
It's number 2 on the agenda, and it says, City Council will conduct a public hearing, consider recommendation of Planning Commission to adopt Ordinance 1830. The City Council...
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
So, if you want to do it,
Yes.
it's a motion to introduce.
Okay, I move that we adopt Ordinance 1830 with the removal of the sentence accompanied by an adult. Okay.
We're doing them separately, so we're going to do that first, and do the
here,
regulations.
I'm going to have you read this.
I don't
It's
have to read the whole thing.
Okay. The motion is officially to introduce the ordinance, not adopt.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you're introducing the ordinance, not
Yeah,
adopting.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I need a second.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Voting's open.
Yes.
Motion carries. There are 5 ayes and 1 no.
I appreciate everybody's patience. This is a very complicated agenda.
And
We're
then you're...
working with new agenda
Right.
formats and
Yes.
and
So now we are addressing regulatory.
Ordinance 1830, which is the regulations,
Yes, the regulations.
amending Title 5.
And I'm waiting for the queue to be cleared. In the event that, are there any council members that would like to speak on the regulations? The regulatory use? If not, I'm looking for a motion and a second.
okay.
Number 3.
Yes, it's 3.
I move we adopt ordinance number 1831.
I'm looking for a
Second.
second. Thank you, Marlene. Thank you, Jack. Voting is now open.
That's an ordinance. You're right.
Motion carries. 5 ayes and 1 nay.
Thank you, Jackie. I believe we're moving on to item 4. Assessments for the city's consolidated benefit assessment district zones 1 through 8. And I believe, Chief, are you addressing this?
Yes, ma'am, I am. All right, there's going to be 2 public hearings contained within number 4. There'll be 4A and 4B. With 4A, every council person is good to participate in this public hearing. This is a public hearing for the annual assessments for the city consolidated benefit assessment districts 1 through 8, with number 5 omitted because of a conflict that exists with number 5. The assessment is an annual thing that we do to reaffirm the assessment. There is no change in the assessments this year. The majority of these, I believe, are still being maintained at 0 in 4A. So if there's any questions or comments, Ruth would be happy to answer them.
If there are no comments from the dais, I'm looking for a motion.
There are
and a
2.
Madam Vice
second.
Mayor,
Are there?
Madam Vice Mayor, this is a public hearing, so.
Oh, there's 2?
There are 2 people in the that I have papers for.
Thank you. This is open to public hearing, and we have 2.
I
Please
have
go
Bill
ahead.
Spear and then David Pittman. Item 4.
Benefit Assessment District.
Completely confused.
Okay.
And then Dave Pittman?
Okay.
Okay.
Then we can close the hearing.
All right. Public hearing is now closed. I'm looking for a motion and a second if there are no comments from the dais.
Okay, I move that we adopt resolution number 8722.
Second.
Voting is open.
Who seconded it?
Was it just
Can I get who seconded it, please?
22 and 23?
No,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have to look. This is 4A, which would have been 8722 only on this one.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
All right, motion carries unanimously.
thank you. Chief, will you be addressing number 5?
Yes, ma'am.
Annual
I'm
assessments?
actually going to go to 4B now. On 4B, I'm going to have to ask Councilperson Art Hatley and Scott Thompson to recuse themselves. They have a financial interest in this area.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Vice Mayor. This is a public hearing for the same assessment district. It just is for the Cala Vista Estates. Both of the council people that have recused themselves just lived in too close a proximity to it. This is an annual public hearing that we do for the assessment for landscape and lighting and maintenance of the area.
Okay. I move that we accept 8723.
If this is going to have to be a public
Okay.
hearing, so we need to open the
Okay.
public hearing.
Okay.
There are 2 speakers.
Just a clarification, this is not landscape and lighting. It's for the benefit assessment district. Sorry. Landscape and lighting is next.
I have Bill Spear and David Pittman for 4 and 5.
Okay. They're
Okay.
good. So in that case, you can close the hearing.
This whole thing is.
And so
Just close the public
Yeah,
hearing.
no one wanted to speak to
no
this.
one wants to speak.
So at that point, you can make a motion.
Public hearing is now closed. I am looking for a motion and a second.
I move that we adopt resolution 8723.
Second.
And is there an authorization for Proposition 218 as well?
Yes.
Vice Mayor, are you going to vote on this?
Could you include?
Yes.
Well, there was all right. There was an inclusion to sign the Proposition 218 certificate as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to
5A, and this one will
5A.
also have I need Councilman Hatley and Thompson to recuse themselves from this one as well.
all right.
This will be resolution number 8724. This will be the landscape and lighting districts. It will be for zones 2 through 16 with the exclusion of, well.
1 through 17?
No, I'm sorry. This will just be 2 through 16 on this one, on 5A. This is the landscape and the lighting, the maintenance of the areas. It's an annual public hearing that you have to do for this. It's an assessment against the properties for the maintenance of the common areas. This is an annual thing. We are looking for a public hearing and then a recommendation.
All right. Are there any comments, public comments that we know of? Jackie?
Same speakers, which they've said they don't want to speak.
All right.
No,
Oh,
I think
okay.
Mr. Pittman.
Thank you. My comments are very simple. I've talked to a number of people, and I agree that these maintenance districts need to be in place. The problem is they don't seem to be too well maintained. So that's an issue that the council should look at, whether city staff is doing the work or if it's contracted out. There probably needs to be a review on that because so many of them just aren't getting what
Maintained.
the locals expect to have. So
Okay.
somehow or another taking attention to that would be good. Thank you.
I'm looking for a motion and a second.
move that we adopt resolution 8724 with the certificate of inclusion
Yes, and I believe that would be 8725 as well.
and resolutions 8725.
I'll second that.
Voting open. Moving on to,
Motion carries.
thank you. B, hearing
Yes.
number 2.
5B. In this one, I'm going to ask to have Councilman Hatley and Thompson come back in the room and Councilman Berry recuse himself from this item.
District for full-time school. Why, I'm sorry, why is Barry recusing himself?
Councilperson Berry, it's necessary for him to recuse himself because he has a financial interest in the area.
Okay. Okay.
This is for resolution number 8726. This is an annual public hearing that is conducted regarding the lighting and landscape districts. It's for the Grandview Estates and the Feather River Bluffs. This is for common area maintenance of the common landscaping areas and also the lighting. The assessment is annually done. We have heard the comment that we need to review this and take a look at it, make sure that it's being adequately done. So we will also include that with all of the districts because I think it's a timely comment and something that we should do. So this is a public hearing and we are here to take public input on this.
Is there any public comment? Jackie?
Dave Pittman and Bill Spear.
Thank you.
Okay.
This agenda item is now open to public hearing.
Landscape maintenance agreement. I think I can speak on that. Kind of fits in with the point earlier about the regulations and being able to follow them. So we make a landscape maintenance agreement. You didn't have to start the clock, huh?
Okay, sorry.
The landscape maintenance agreement, and so we make all these regulations, and it wasn't too long ago I was in here talking about the tree regulation, and it was the very next week I was doing a job at the old Walmart building, cutting the trees down, trimming them down for the signs. It was a private contract between a private company and two private companies. I provided the service when I said I would, and they were happy with it. But during my work there, I was interrupted by the city. Said they had a landscape maintenance agreement. They stopped the work that I was doing to say that I wasn't fulfilling the landscape maintenance agreement. So I stopped and met with them, and didn't look very professional for me in front of my clients right there downtown Oroville. So they gave me a copy of the landscape maintenance agreement. When I got back, I started reading the landscape maintenance agreement, and it seems like the city, if there was a problem with them and their client, nothing to do with me, they were to put it in writing and give them 7 days to correct it. Nowhere did they have the authority to come in and stop me from working on what I was doing. My point is, we continue to put out all these regulations that who knows them all? There's so many of them. To enforce the ones we feel like enforcing, we need to try to figure out how to start reducing regulations, reducing the amount of stuff that we put over our city officials to try to manage. They already have too much stuff. Wherever we can, we need to start looking at. Tonight, you guys put so much stuff forward and just passing stuff through. There's no way that the people in the city can look at all the stuff that you're putting and put any kind of input. It was a really confusing meeting tonight. It was really too much stuff. All the numbers. We need to slow down. Regulations matter. Landscape management agreements matter. We need to do less. We need to do it better. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? All right, the public hearing portion is now closed for this agenda item. Are there any comments from the dais? I'm looking for a motion and a second. Voting is open.
Was there a motion?
There was no motion yet.
I'm just fast forwarding.
Okay. I move that we adopt resolution number 8726 and 8727 and authorize the mayor to sign the Proposition 218 certificate for inclusion on the 2018-2019 Butte County tax roll.
Second.
Voting's open.
Motion passes.
We're moving on to, I believe we're at agenda item 21.
22.
21? That would
You are
be the
correct.
utility
Right,
user
there is no
tax.
22. Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Madam Vice Mayor and Council. This is an item that was brought forward at the request of the council. It is a discussion regarding the utility user tax. The report goes over the little bit of the history of the utility user tax, and what the impacts of a reduction of that would be at this time. Staff at this time is recommending that due to the uncertainty of our financial future that we do not do this at this time, but we do schedule to revisit this in January when we have a little bit better idea of what our financial future looks like. But this is a discussion for the council. It was the council's request.
I'm in the queue.
Councilwoman Draper and Councilmember Thompson will be next.
Well, I would like to say I don't see that our financial situation is going to be much different in January. We know that we will be in the black for one more year, and then we're going to be in the red, from what I have understood from our finance director. And we have $800,000 a year due on our CalPERS debt, and we can't just wave a magic wand and get that paid. So, of course, the utility user tax is completely out of the question. We would be complete idiots to entertain something like that when we don't know if we're going to have enough money next year. And I appreciate all the comments that have been made this evening about other ways to get revenue. From what I have been told, we have two options to get large amounts of revenue. One is a sales tax, which will be on the ballot in November again. And the other that we had hoped to do, and may or may not, depending upon how things go, would be the cannabis tax. Okay, those are our two options to bring in a considerable amount of money. And so I would love to hear from those people out there who say they have ideas on what we can do to bring in more revenue, because we certainly are in dire straits, and we would definitely entertain any of your ideas. Okay, that's all I have to say.
All right.
I would like to add to that.
Councilman Thompson is in the queue.
What I would like to just go ahead.
I need to address. I've heard some comments, and I'll put it under the quotes around comments coming from members of the audience that are highly inappropriate. And I would ask that they please refrain from making comments and name calling of council members. Thank you.
I'd like to open the discussion again. We talked about last time we talked in regards to the utility user tax, of setting something up, because especially if the sales tax measure passes, and also the council, and or even if just the sales tax measure passed, I would like to see this repealed. the utility user tax. And so at this point, I would love to see something put into place if the case may be that the sales tax measure passes. Is there something we can do in that regards of just putting something forward so that it's already set in place, so that if that passes in November, we can move forward with repealing the utility user tax?
If a majority of council wishes to do that, you could bring back the appropriate, I believe it'd be an ordinance, but the appropriate measure that would repeal upon effective date of the sales tax, if that were the desire of council.
So you can make something with, I see, making that not to go into effect until January 2019, and if the sales tax measure doesn't pass, then you just cancel it out. Is that correct?
I believe you can, but even if that weren't the case, and I defer to Mr. Huber on that, but even if you couldn't, you could set it up in a way that it would, you'd adopt it at that point. So you could effectively do that if that were the council's desire.
The reason why, one of the main reasons why I'm in favor of that is the, currently I've said it before and I'll say it again, but currently the map of Oroville, it just looks so goofy. You know, with it goes up and then it goes out, and it just is, you have a portion of the citizens of Oroville, because really the whole area, they are Orovillians. You know, you ask them where they live, and they say they live in Oroville, whether or not they live in actual city limits. But you have the people who live within the city limits who are bearing the burden of the whole community. So I think a sales tax is more fair, as opposed to putting the burden on those who actually live inside a certain lines, while we're all using those taxes and paying for, because even the crimes that happen within city limits can happen from, and often happen from, people who live outside of that line. And so having a sales tax is more fair to the community, and so repealing that would make it, again, just a fair deal for Oroville.
I understand what you're saying, and I would just tell you, as a staff member, I would indicate I don't believe the city could afford a full repeal. There may be some options short of that, but that'd take away basically half of what you gain in your sales tax.
No, correct, and I understand that as well. And I actually initially was pushing for a 0.5% sales tax, and so the 1% with that repeal would be a 0.5.
Vice Mayor, I'm in the queue. I don't know who else is.
I'm in the queue.
And I believe that Councilwoman Del Rosario was first, if you don't mind,
No,
and
I don't mind.
Councilwoman Draper.
Repealing the utility users tax, I would agree to that for the elderly who are low income. I would not agree to it for the rest of the city. There's no purpose in doing the marijuana. We put ourselves on the line to do cannabis because we don't have any other method of raising money. People come in and tell us there are other ways to do it, but no one comes forward with ideas. Come forward with your ideas. We will accept them. We have put ourselves on the line here to do something that we realize that members of our community don't agree with. But we need to have an increase in funding, or the city is going to go bankrupt. We have come to that point. We have one more year in the black, and then we go red. So please bring your ideas forward. If you have better ideas, bring them forward. Don't just say there are other ways. Tell us what they are. If you've got a magic wand out there, please wave it. We're very anxious to hear it. And repealing the utility user tax doesn't help us. It just puts us further back. I don't know what else to say, you know. I'm open to anything, really. So just stop berating us for trying to do something for the city. Please. Thank you.
Councilwoman Draper.
I'm just going to read a couple of things from the staff report that was prepared by Chief Legrone. And it says here, each year the utility user tax generates approximately $1.8 million in revenue. And so the monies generated by this tax are not restricted dollars and are currently being used to fund a portion of each city department. The elimination of this tax will reduce the city revenue. With no new money, will exacerbate the city's negative financial position. The city is currently in a position of having to use one-time money, which is savings, to make our budget balance. I'm going to repeat that. The city is currently in a position of having to use one-time money, which is savings, to make our budget balance. The shortfall this year is approximately $274,000. This amount is growing each year due to increased costs. This hole in our budget will grow and eventually cause the failure of the city if it is not addressed with new revenue. And the city has reduced the workforce, as you've all heard frequently, from 147 employees to 90 employees. And so no, we don't have the manpower to take care of the things that should be taken care of. We just don't have it. And so we're doing the best we can here with what we're given. And but this utility user tax is not going away anytime soon because we just cannot afford to do that. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the dais? If not, I'm looking for a motion and a second.
Madam Vice Chairman,
In regards to the recommendation.
Actually,
it's just a recommendation.
Correct.
I'm sorry.
There may be members of the public who wish to comment on this item.
I don't have any
Jackie
speaker
would have.
cards.
We have that line of communication, I can tell. When we have someone and I know we don't.
You know.
Thank you. All right. Absolutely. If anyone else wishes to speak, would you please submit a blue speaker card? Thank you.
I am Steve Christensen. 3 years ago, I suggested if this city would sacrifice the utility tax, at that time it was bringing in $1.6 million a year, that we voters would approve the sales tax, which would replace the $1.6 million with $3.6 million. To me, that is a $2 million annual revenue increase. If you can't understand that, I would sure like to trade with you. Thank you.
Stephanie Toolsley. Towsley. I'm so sorry. I will get it.
I should just make it a W. So, I'm sorry. Is this on the agenda? Did I miss something?
It's utility.
It is on the
user
agenda for
tax.
discussion,
It's
yes.
Okay.
Item 21.
Okay. 21. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I couldn't find the number. I'm sorry. So, I feel like giving up the utility tax is not a solution for a city that has a tremendous financial dire straits at this moment. I'm not exactly sure what even the logic is for that. Just because we're going to switch taxes, I don't understand. I thought we were all agreed that we were in a place that we are brainstorming any possible idea that will bring in more money, not in any way, shape, or form take away money from the city ever. I don't understand why anyone on the city council would want that. I mean, I heard that was a suggestion, but I don't even understand the why. So please do not do anything that would take away revenue from this city. We are not in a position to even consider anything like that. We are in a position that needs as much revenue as possible.
That would be my last card.
Walk on up, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jackie. That will be the last one from Pastor Bill.
This is my last card, yes.
Thank you.
Obviously, we gotta keep the tax, although I'm against taxes. I think I could spend my money better than the government can. But there's all kinds of ideas. We could be business friendly. You know, I've seen people come with presentations about, you know, hey, we want to open this and we want to open that. And instead of making things real hard for people, be more friendly to them and more open and say, yeah, how can we help you? Instead of, well, I don't like where you're going to put your sign, or how's this going to go out, make it a big deal to get the zoning changed. When out there in the real world, when we don't have enough money to make ends meet, we make cuts where we can, and we work longer hours. Small business is where it's gonna get our city prospering. There's all kinds of empty buildings. Make incentives. You know, we gave $40,000 for some pot person to do whatever. You know, that could have been a big help to get a small business going, or make resources of the city more business friendly. We have a beautiful river, a beautiful lake. Just being more business friendly, being more nicer to people when they come to talk, and being kinder, changing the culture of our city, making people want to come here. We've got so much stuff going for us. We're the county seat, and we got a river that runs right through this, and we need to try to be friendlier when people come with, you know, that corner thing when the guy was giving the presentation, or the thing out there. Instead of making it hard and picking them apart, say, yeah, give them a little encouragement. Encourage the small businessman. Encourage the corporation. So what if they're from Southern California? They're bringing their money here, and they're gonna the airport. Be more business friendly. Quit making so many regulations. Quit making it so hard for somebody to come in and open a business downtown. Look into supporting the people that are here, supporting the ones downtown. That'll add revenue. That'll add jobs. That'll change our city, one person at a time, one business at a time.
This closes public comment. Are there any other comments from council members?
In that case, we shifted public comment to this portion also. And we have a series of cards for public comment.
We do?
We do.
All right.
Jack, you're on again.
Okay. I just need to write down the time.
You can read the name first.
Stephanie Towsley, Stephen Terry, and Bill Spear.
Non-agenda items. Non-agenda items, and again, council cannot act on them. They're simply hearing what you have to say.
I get 3 minutes?
You do.
Yes, you do.
I budgeted for less. Sorry.
Go ahead. You start. Once she's up there. Go.
Okay, so last city council meeting, I spoke about the fact that a CTA, which is an option that we have as energy users of PG&E, there is regulation, or there has been deregulation that allows other providers, other gas providers mostly, to come in and offer us gas at a cheaper rate. But what I said last time was that I had warned others not to sign up with any of these CTAs, is what they're called, because PG&E merely changes your bill from a gas fee to a gas delivery fee. So you're still using their pipes, so that's how they justify that. It's impossible to save money with a third-party provider at this moment because the CPUC and PG&E have made sure that no company can actually be real competition. Other states like Texas prohibit the main monopoly, like PG&E, from doing this, and thus their energy bills are a fraction of what ours are, and they are able to take advantage of the lower gas rates that these CTAs offer. So, I didn't know this was going to happen to me, but last week I received a letter from both Greenwave Energy and PG&E saying that I had switched my gas provider. This was not true. We had not given anyone permission to make this change. I had to spend a great deal of time, hours of time, arguing with both companies and demanding that they cancel the transaction and that I should not have to pay anything extra. I don't even know that that's a sure thing at this moment. I may have to spend an extra $40 for the next 2 months because PG&E can't change it back immediately. I also told PG&E that I felt that my privacy had been breached and I was irate that there was no way to protect my account indefinitely from being changed. So any third-party provider can say on my behalf that I have agreed to make a change when in fact I haven't. I asked if I could put a permanent block on my account and they said that it wasn't possible at this time, and I plan to pursue this with PG&E. But I published this on the Butte County Accidents Facebook page and was amazed to hear that at least half a dozen other people had their accounts fraudulently changed by this Greenwave Energy also. And there were about 40 other people who had signed up with a couple other CTAs that have come along. Spark Energy was one, and they all could attest to the fact that their bills did not go down. They ended up getting charged between $50 to $100 extra a month. So literally, it is a fact. You cannot save money at this time. I would like to know what the city can do to protect us from this. I understand it is the company's right to reach out to the public and offer this service, Greenwave, Spark Energy, these companies. But they are fraudulently claiming that people's bills will go down. I'm just wondering, can the city censure them, or are there any other legal avenues that we can use to protect us, the citizens?
Scott, could you weigh in on that, please?
Sure. What I would say is come see me and we can chat about it. I can give you some advice. The city really can't take any action, but I can give you some. No.
Go ahead.
Stephen Terry, Bill Spear, and then Thomas Swenson.
Good evening once again. I'm actually approaching tonight as one of the fudders, as a comment earlier tonight regarding those of us who disagree. Comment to Councilmember Draper. I would agree with you. You've heard me speak many times. I do not like people berating, and nor will I. I do not agree with the decision. I've made it clear. But berating people is not the answer either. I don't have the answer. I wish I did. I can only tell you that in 20 years, I have witnessed the destruction, and this drug is a part of it. This is not about bullying people. It's not about anything like that. This is just the facts. And the truth is, people can say this is unsubstantiated, but I would invite you to come to the Oroville Rescue Mission and take a tour. And it won't be unsubstantiated anymore. I know that I'm beating a dead horse. I get that. It's passed, but folks, it's not legal. It's still not legal. California passed it. It's still federally against the law. I have an issue with this. I understand you're looking for revenue. I understand. I don't believe there's one person up here that has anything but the best intentions for our city. But I don't believe this is the answer. And like I said, I would invite you to come down to where I work and talk to people that I deal with. They're there. They'll talk to you. I have lots of clients that would. And you'll hear that. We're walking down a bad alley, and I don't think we're prepared to go the way we're going. I don't think we have the manpower. I don't think we have the law enforcement right now. We are so overtaxed in this, folks. I understand looking for finances. I do. I get it. I run a nonprofit. I get it. The summer times, I'm always looking for a way to raise revenue. I get it. I don't have an answer for you right now. I'd be willing to sit and try and help come up with ideas, but I don't have the answer. So, thank you.
I would again clarify that this time is time to speak to items not on the agenda or not previously discussed on the agenda.
Beal Spear, Thomas Sorensen, and then Bobby O'Reilly.
City Council, it's my understanding that non-agenda items was to encourage the public to speak on whatever they want, operating in their First Amendment right. And it was to be uninterrupted and no comments made back. It's supposed to encourage free speech. And with that, I do have solutions, and I got answers, and that's why I'm here tonight, to pray. The Bible says if anyone is in trouble, they should pray. Our city's in trouble, and I came here with a solution. If anyone lacks wisdom, they should ask God, who gives generously to all, and it will be given to them. So, Father, I pray for our city. I pray for our city council members that you would give them wisdom as we navigate through, that we would look to you for our provision and for guidance of the way we should go. I thank you for the Planning Commission and for their wisdom, that you've given them wisdom, and I pray that you would continue as they look at this objectively, planning for the future of our city. Father, we thank you for the police force and the fire department that's thin and stretched thin and that are overworked, that you would give them courage and that you would strengthen them and that you would be with them as they're out there fighting for all of us. And Lord, we lift up the children to you, that they would not get caught up in, there's so many traps for them and so many dangers out there, that you would use us, Lord, to show them a good example. Use us to raise them up, Lord. We pray for the schools and for the child care, the daycare. Is the Planning Commission was talking about the daycares that are open up. We pray that for Oroville. Daycares would open up, that there'd be so many jobs, that small businesses would prosper. We pray for our resources that you've given us, Lord, that we would use them wisely, that we would not squander them, that we would not cut off parts of the community because we don't agree with them, but that we would encourage one another, that we would work as one, that our community would come together and rise to this challenge, that we would have the testimony of this was happening and this was happening, but then God heard our prayers and and we prospered. And we thank you for all the jobs up at the dam. It looked like it was for our destruction, but it was in that time that you brought provision. And we just pray that you continue to bring provisions from you, from where we would give you all the credit and all the glory, that it would be wisdom that is from you. It would be your kingdom come, your will be done. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Madam Vice Mayor, if I might make a clarification.
Please.
The time to speak for non-agenda items is not unfettered. It is not, you are correct that there's a First Amendment right to that. It is not an unlimited, unfettered discussion. It actually has to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of this council. So while that is a broad area, it does have to relate to city business and be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. The reason why there's a separation of agenda items and non-agenda, or a discussion of agenda items and non-agenda discussion, is because any item that's on the agenda, you need to focus on your discussions during that item. For all items that are not on the agenda, all the discussion that you want to have for anything that's not on the agenda can come at a separate time. and it keeps the meeting running orderly. And if we, if everybody who wanted to talk about an item spoke twice about, you'd have it during the agenda item itself, and then during the non-agenda item, everyone would make the same points. It's just to try to make the meeting more efficient. It's not unlimited, it's not unfettered, but you are correct. There is a First Amendment right to it. What I would say is, again, it's the time to address the council generally, not individuals. If anybody wants to talk to any individual member of the council, I know them all well. You all can sit down and individually have a cup of coffee or a soda and sit down and talk, and that they would all take you up on that and hear all the ideas. But this is the time where you talk to all of them. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Huber.
Thomas Swanson.
Thank you.
Okay, Bobby O'Reilly, and then John Miller George, and then Steve Christensen.
Good evening once again. I am tired. I am ready for bed. Anyhow, so I am happy, actually very happy, that we will be able to, or the city will be able to, help small businesses or any businesses wishing to come into the city, wishing to do business within the city. There are places like San Francisco, stories that I've read lately that rent is getting too expensive, cost of operations are getting too expensive, so these businesses are looking for other places to go. There is this one particular steel company, metalwork company, that looked at Oroville. Wouldn't work because we couldn't offer them what they needed to be able to survive, so they went to Colusa. There are many other companies like this company. I am so happy that I now get to spread the word that Oroville has set a precedence of having a sliding scale, working with local businesses on their taxes to help them get started, because that is what the council has now done. Once this issue passes, the city will have set a precedence that they are willing to work with small businesses, companies, corporations to help them get started, because if anyone is willing to entertain the idea for one, they must entertain the idea for all. So I'm excited. I'm going to help spread the word as soon as this goes through and the precedence is set, so we can start getting some of these guys in the bigger cities who are looking for places to go. Let's get them to Oroville, work with them on getting them started, lower taxes to start up and give them a cap, and that's going to be phenomenal. That will help get businesses into the city of Oroville.
Steve Christensen, Lorena Christensen, and then Andrew Smith.
I am Steve Christensen. I've been a business owner in Oroville for 52 years, and I'm here to make a statement that does relate to the city council. For the first time in all those years, I received a threat. It relates to the city council because the threat came from council member Marlene Del Rosario's husband. The threat came from a messenger the morning of July 27th. The threat was, "Tell that barber he better watch it." I was so disturbed, I reported it to Oroville Police Department. One thing I said to Officer Iverson was, if my place gets dynamited while I'm in it, I want the police to know who's been threatening me. And to my knowledge, I don't believe I've ever met Mr. Del Rosario. Thank you.
Lorena Christensen, Andrew Smith, and then our last speaker card is Chuck Reynolds.
I'm Lorraine Christensen, and I think you can tell from my husband's voice this has been a very stressful week for us. People say if you see something, say something, and this is the second time we've had an incident and a second report that has been made to Chief Legrone. Several months ago, there was an incident outside this hall, And I was so disturbed by it, not because it intimidated me, because I was angry that this kind of actions were brought into our Oroville area. And as my husband said, on July 27th, I, standing with a customer, heard a threat relayed to him. The man said Mr. Del Rosario came into his shop, represented himself as affiliated with the law enforcement, and he was a husband of a sitting councilwoman. And then he asked, "Do you know Steve the barber?" The two threats, intimidation actions that we have witnessed now, you're well trained in how to distance yourselves from that action. The first one was several months ago when I walked up to this council meeting, and I chose, after having a discussion with Chief Legrone and a man I respect very greatly, that it would not be in the interest of the community to bring it forward. But to stay silent has not silenced anything. And that action was when I walked up to the courthouse door. There was a man with a billy club, whapping it in his hand like this, standing right next to David Goodson with his hand stretched out for me to shake with a smile on his face. That billy club was later being, the guy had it in his jacket, showed around the council chamber. In the best interest of the community, I did not bring that out. But now that my husband has had a threat levied against him in a very real way, this has to stop. If people don't speak out, this cannot continue. This is not what you were elected for, to govern by intimidation. And Mr. Del Rosario, maybe you can tell us what it meant.
Ma'am, we're now well beyond what is appropriate comments. If a threat was made, you've made a report to the police, that's fine. It was not by a member of the city council. It was not related to city business. So if there's something that this city can deal with the council, that can come up at a subsequent agenda, or they can deal with, that's what would be appropriate to talk about.
So how does the person who's been threatened by council members' husbands have a voice to protect themselves?
You talk to Chief Legrone about that. But it's not, unless you were threatened by a member of this council, it's not something for this council to deal with.
Well, I just want the community to know what we're dealing with this group of 5 that are on our council. Thank you.
Andrew Smith. Chuck Reynolds.
I wasn't going to speak on the non-agenda item until I believe I was indirectly addressed. I've met every one of you individually. I find you all to be pleasant people. I enjoy speaking to all of you personally. I just met the last lady tonight over at the municipal. Nice, pleasant to speak with. It's just that our ideas are different. And I understand it. With the exclusion of Councilman Thompson, I realize he's been a business owner. Everyone, and no disrespect, please don't take that. And I'm not berating anybody, but every one of you have worked for somebody. Somebody has signed your checks all of your life. Nobody's ever signed my checks. I took and built 2 businesses from nothing that generate millions of dollars of income per year and employ dozens of people. It's just a different mindset. There was never anyone for me to go to with the problems. I had to figure them out. So it's just a different position. No disrespect. I'm not, I understand that all of you have worked as employees. I have lots of employees. I really value employees. I do. But it's a different mindset. So I just wanted to say that. Please don't think that I've known some of you all of my life. I don't have any ill feelings towards any of you. It's just our ideas that are different, and some of us get emotional. I apologize. It hits home because this has been home all our lives. So I wanted to address that.
Vice Mayor, I did get one more speaker card for Sherry Bunker.
Yes, thank you.
What recourse do I have? What about?
Good evening, Council. I would like to end this evening on a happy note. I am the president of the Exchange Club of Oroville, and we have voted to have one of the city's, school resource officers attend a class for cyberbullying for the schools, and that'll be this Friday. It's an 8-hour class, and we've sponsored the officer for that.
Okay.
He didn't do it.
All right, we're going to move on to council announcements and committee reports.
I'll start while others are getting ready. Had the wonderful opportunity to lead a whole bunch of kids from the YMCA as they were brought here to council chambers and talk to them about city government, talk to them about what we do here at Oroville, and they had a little mock election, and they got to argue over how they were going to spend money and priorities. It was a real fun and a great opportunity just to kind of educate kids on government, what government's for, and how things happen, and having to agree on stuff to get things to move forward. So it was a great thing the YMCA did.
And you did a great job speaking to them.
Thanks.
Will there be any other council?
I'm in the queue, I think, Vice Mayor.
Sorry. It's not clear.
It's blinking here.
Hold on.
All right, please go right ahead.
Mine's really brief. On July 12th, I attended the Housing Loan Advisory Committee meeting. And July 25th, I attended the Supplemental Benefit Fund Committee meeting from 5:30 to 7. And it was a really good meeting. The idea was broached to hire a consultant to replace Don Nevers, who resigned. And we were able to vote that we would try to fill that position, although it's going to be really difficult to find someone with her qualifications. So.
Thank you. Just real quick, I'll weigh in. I also attended the Housing Advisory meeting, but I also want to thank staff for writing a grant. And I had hoped that Mr. Farley was going to be here this evening. And what that grant has done is it has resulted in $657,000. This funding will help the Oroville Airport to remain an economic engine. So thank you for all your hard work. Chief, administrative report?
If I could just clean up a few things left on the agenda. There was a presentation earlier regarding the Artist of Rivertown. The Artist of Rivertown with Frida Flint specifically, I have been working with. Frida has agreed to keep our chambers fresh. What I mean by that is updating the art that's in here. She'll be, I'll be working with her, and we're going to be moving the eagle statue into a more appropriate area so that it's not out here. It'll be in the chambers, just moved somewhere else. There'll be some art put up that'll be in the back, and Frida has agreed to rotate that art. We've discussed the parameters of that to make sure that it's non-secular, it is non-offensive, and it is tasteful. So she's agreed to do that. I do want to inform the council of that. This is your chambers, and prior to me starting to redecorate it, I figured I should probably let you know what I'm up to. So that was the point of the presentation. The other item I'd like to update you on is the annexation of the area that is to the south of Oroville, the industrial annexation on Feather River Boulevard. We have recently met with county staff and the executive director of LAFCO. Where that sits right now is we are working with the Butte County Planning Department. They will be the ones looking at, presenting, and if the council directs, processing this application. So I think Mr. Lando may have some input on that?
We are, we're talking with the county and bringing forward, probably the next meeting, a short-term agreement where they'll help us with some of our planning needs, including the processing of this annexation.
All right. Thank you.
It would be short-term.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Are there any other administration reports from Ruth?
I'm going to jump back in prior to Ruth. What you have in front of you is your monthly report from all the departments in the city, giving you a priority list update on those particular items. The police department report was included with your staff, with your agenda packet. With that, I don't believe I have anything else.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate you generating these reports, and it helps us a lot.
Just for
to
clarity,
know what's going on in the other
I'm sorry, the one thing that wasn't mine, but I agreed to do it for Amy Jernigan. She is a member of the Butte County Fair Board. She is the one that dropped off the posters and the envelopes that were contained with those. She's inviting the council to the fair and to, I believe they have a some sort of a barbecue that they put on, and all the council's invited. She wanted to come by and welcome you and ask you to please attend if you can.
Thank you.
That's it.
Ruth, anything? Mr. Lando?
I think the chief covered it. I think we were good.
All right. Mr. Huber?
Madam Vice Mayor, one of the speakers tonight had some handouts for you. I'll go ahead and deliver those to you tonight, or if for those who aren't here, I'll put them in your box, but just so you're aware.
Thank you. All right. Gary, nothing to report? All right.
No, Chief covered it.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, this meeting is adjourned. The next meeting, a regular meeting of the Oroville City Council, will be held on Tuesday, August 21st, 2018 at 5:30 p.m. Have a good night and be safe.